Balance of Power continues right now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyons.
All right, Charlie Pellet in New York, thank you so much. Here in Washington, we're keeping an eye on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue and where they're intersecting today, as a meeting is set to take place at the White House between top administration officials, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and leadership on Capitol Hill from both chambers, inclusive of House Speaker Mike Johnson, the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, as well as the heads of the tax writing committees, Senator Mark Crapo and Congressman Jason Smith, all there to talk tax cuts and reconciling the different ways in which the House and Senate would like to see those tax cuts pursued in budget reconciliation. Now, we understand there's some gaps to bridge here, although the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, when talking to reporters earlier today, suggested no such gaps exist.
There's no daylight between House and Senate Republicans. We are one team. I speak with Leader Thune about this constantly, and with individual members of the Senate over there. We're all united on the mission, and there's been different ideas about how to complete the mission, but I think it's all coming together now. This week will be pivotal.
So let's bring it to a vote. Running Bloomberg's Capital Influence team, Megan Scully, with her eyes on Capitol Hill, and joining us now at the table ahead of our conversation with Congressman Marlin Stutzman. Megan, it's great to see you. Of course, this is not a layup. This is a threading of the needle with some very big issues. We're talking again to remind everybody about extending Trump tax cuts, potentially lifting the debt limit, and doing it all without adding to the debt. Is that possible?
Yeah, maybe if we do some fuzzy math, which is what they're recommending, particularly in the Senate, basically not counting a renewal of Trump's tax cuts as new cuts, basically deficit neutral, so then they can move forward on some of the other promises the president has put forth, like no taxes on Social Security or no taxes on tips. We're getting into that fuzzy math period of these negotiations, and while this week will indeed be pivotal, with Congress back from a recess, it is just the beginning. I mean, we're talking about several months likely ahead in terms of negotiations between the two chambers.
Even though the speaker is suggesting he wants to see a vote on this done by Memorial Day, which is going to be coming up pretty quickly in terms of legislative days. Megan, when we consider this notion that math may get fuzzy, is math required to be fuzzy if the Senate is to get what it wants, which is a permanent extension of the 2017 tax cuts rather than just an extension, which is what the House plan originally called for?
So a lot of this actually will come down to the Senate parliamentarian, who is not somebody that most Americans are familiar with. And she will rule, Elizabeth McDonough is her name, and she will rule essentially what is allowed and what is not allowed in this debate in terms of how we're counting these tax cuts and how we're counting these spending, any new spending, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of this will be happening behind the scenes, and we'll see how it plays out in the coming months. But in addition to sort of the rules here, you also have divisions within the Republican Party between those who really want to move forward with deep spending cuts, including 2 entitlement programs, these deficit hawks, and then others who want to be more liberal with tax cuts. So there's going to be a lot of push and pull, not just between the House and the Senate, but between Republicans in both chambers.
So what gets done, if anything, in this meeting today? Does John Thune make it clear he needs to take the wheel?
I think that right now the ball is very much in the Senate court, and the Senate has been sort of in the background of this as we saw the House get it through its own budget blueprint just last month. So now it is the Senate's turn to to figure out whether they're going to move forward with what the House has passed or whether they're going to go their own way here. As you mentioned a few minutes ago, the debt ceiling is a key component of this. We're going to have a new ex-date projection later this week, and we're anticipating that to be this summer sometime. And do they deal with that as part of this whole Republican-only bill on tax cuts, or do they do it separately and require Democrats to weigh in as well?
Well, we know President Trump has expressed some pretty strong feelings about what he thinks should be done with the debt ceiling recently. He either wants it lifted until he's out of office or abolished. It doesn't seem that he's expressed much specificity as to what wants to be done with it. Other than that, he wants it addressed? How much is it his voice that matters above all others in this conversation?
So certainly we have seen him, matter very much in these negotiations, including making calls to lawmakers as they're walking onto the floor. We've seen him reverse votes, at the very last minute. So that is certainly central here. But for a lot of deficit hawks, the debt ceiling is persona non grata. Like, they do not want to lift it. They do not want to eradicate it. They see this as the biggest forcing function that we have to keep spending under any kind of control. So I do think that becomes much more complicated for the president. But certainly, like I said, we've seen him change hearts and minds in the Capitol in the last several months.
Indeed, we have. All right, Megan Scully, who leads our Capitol Influence team here at Bloomberg, thank you so much. And as we consider those deficit hawks that exist in Congress, they also exist on Wall Street. Just look at Ray Dalio, the chair of Bridgewater Associates, who, of course, has done extensive research into debt and deficits and actually shared some of that knowledge on Capitol Hill today.
Yeah, I wonder what the reception was. Of course, Bridgewater Associates founder, more likely to appear on Bloomberg probably than on Capitol Hill. But to have a room full at a moment like this, to be preaching about the history of debt crises does bring us back to the complexities in paying for all of this, Kaylee.
Yeah, he was addressing specifically the House Budget Committee, and one of its members is joining us now here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman of Indiana is back with us on Balance of Power, live from Capitol Hill. Congressman, thank you very much for your time. Can you shed some light as to what exactly Ray Dalio shared with you today?
Yeah, Kaylee, great to be with you again. Yeah, it was fascinating to have these outside voices, which I think is really critical to this whole deficit and debt conversation, and basically just the federal budget as a whole, and having Mr. Dalio there to answer questions and just really share his thoughts were really insightful. I mean, one of the things that I walked away with is that he's like, you got to take care of this before a recession hits. And, timeline could be 2, 3, 4 years. Don't know exactly when. But as I walked out with some of my staff who are younger, they said, oh, how are we going to sleep tonight after hearing that? Because his comments are really, he's a realist, and I appreciate that. And I think that's what a lot of us on Capitol Hill in Congress should be doing right now. And, being realistic about where we're at, $36 trillion of debt, deficits out of control, and getting back to balanced budgets is critical. And he really just laid out a very thoughtful, realistic plan. With a lot of details, but hit those high points that we should all be considering, and one of those is spending cuts. And so I think that's why the House budget is addressing that, and knowing that having these outside voices, which I think is critical to moving Congress forward and actually doing something, is very timely, and I was glad he was here today.
Really interesting, Congressman. Thanks for bringing us in the room here. And I'm curious about what you said about getting ahead of the next recession. Is that because it would be impossible to pass this bill in the throes of a recession, or a bill like this will prevent one?
He said that it would help prevent it. And, his plan, 3-point plan, basically was 4% spending cuts, 4% increase in revenue, and then having to lower the debt service, 1% roughly. And I think I asked him the question because when Treasury Secretary came down and visited with a group of us, he talked about how he's going to go out to those debt holders and say, hey, America is still a good place to invest. But as Mr. Dalio said, I asked him, can we restructure the debt? In business, at some point, you have the ability to go and restructure and hopefully get better terms. And his comments were not very optimistic. He said things are getting bad enough that those who have the debt would be very skeptical to restructure debt. And so I think that's why all of us, Republicans and Democrats, need to realize that this debt is becoming a crisis here in the next 3 to 5 years, and maybe sooner. So we have to address it today.
Well, and something that does need to be addressed in at least the next few months, and we'll get a specific ex-date estimate from the Congressional Budget Office tomorrow, Congressman, is the debt ceiling, which it could impact the way in which the U.S. is seen as creditworthy, if there is still full faith in the United States credit or not. Obviously, in the House bill, the debt ceiling increase is included. Do you believe the Senate ultimately will come around to that and include it in its own package, or is this going to have to be dealt with separately?
Well, I was interested in what Megan was reporting before I came on, and I think, you know, from what we feel here in the House is that keeping this one big, beautiful bill, as President Trump likes to call it, is really the way forward. We address the debt ceiling, we address spending cuts, we address the tax policy, and as the committees of jurisdiction start working through all of that, I think that's going to be the path forward. We're going to have to jump on this, jump together as Republicans, because I don't think we're going to get very much help from Democrats. But, you know, kind of back to Mr. DeLeo's comments, is that we do have to have spending cuts. We do have to see increase in revenue, but there's ways of doing that. I think tariffs is a short-term solution to increase in revenues. A growing economy will obviously help with that. So, you know, then also if we can somehow see lower interest rates to move forward on a budget package that I think addresses all of those. And so I hope the Senate will seriously consider the House package, because I think anything else short of that in the House is going to, if the Senate passes something else, I think it's going to be very difficult to pass in the House.
Congressman, when you were a state lawmaker in Indiana, you helped Governor Mitch Daniels eliminate $1 billion deficit. There was no DOGE and there were no tariffs to provide revenue, but you did it without raising taxes. Can't you bring a lesson from that experience to this debate? How did you do it?
Yeah, well, first of all, Mitch Daniels was Doge before it was cool. He was known as the Blade, if you remember, when he was OMB director, and Governor Daniels really turned Indiana around in a way that has set us on a very strong path going forward fiscally. Balanced budgets, we haven't seen deficits in Indiana for years. We actually are seeing a growing population, a great place to do business. And so I tell that story over and over. And we had a tight majority in 2005 when Governor Daniels came into office, and we passed a budget that would give him 2 years to balance, but he, of course, did it in 1 year. But that's the type of leadership Governor Daniels was, and I think that's the type of leadership we have with President Trump. He's talking about balanced budgets. DOGE is giving Congress this insight that we have needed for many years to get actually closer to the action, to see where spending is going and where we can do better in appropriating and authorizing. So I think that that experience is going to be very helpful. And I see this freshman class as the type of class that's here to make those hard votes, to cast those hard votes, but also making sure that we put America on the right course for success and prosperity.
Well, and as you previously mentioned, Congressman, the president obviously thinks one way to do that is to enact tariffs on our trading partners, obviously looking ahead to next week, which he says will bring Liberation Day, April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs. But now he's talking about carve-outs or exemptions for some countries. He says auto tariffs may be coming in the coming days. Do you feel you can give businesses and consumers in your district in Indiana clarity as to what Liberation Day will actually bring and what will come after it?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of, mixed reactions, talking with the steel industry, the tariffs are good for the steel industry. Talking with the ag community, it's a mixed bag there. But I think at the end of the day, what I hear from my constituents in the ag sector and manufacturing sector is that there's trust in Trump that he's going to settle this in the long run. And they know that it's going to take a little bit of time. They also know that deregulation is coming, and that's going to be helpful to the economy, energy production and the cost of energy, and then also just simply confidence. If we get these tax rates, if we make them permanent, or even if we extend them for 4 or 5 years, which I think would be sufficient to just give certainty, will make a huge difference. And then whatever volatility is seen from the tariffs, we can ride through that. But there's going to be days that there's question marks, but I think in the long run, there's a lot of trust for President Trump, knowing he's a businessman, knowing he's been through things like this before, and also, the fact that reciprocal tariffs just simply mean if you're going to tariff us $1, we're going to tariff you $1. And at some point, I hope the conversation leads to, hey, what if we just lower all tariffs down and really have fair trade and free trade?
A world with no tariffs. Congressman Marlon Stutzman, it's great to have you back, sir, from Indiana's 3rd District. Republican voice today from Capitol Hill as these meetings take place on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. We'll be tracking, of course, the reconciliation process for you on the regular here. Alongside Kaylee Lyons, I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. It's great to have you with us on Bloomberg TV and radio as we assemble our panel next on a busy day here in the nation's capital. Stay with us on the fastest show in politics. This is Bloomberg.
It's 121 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We've got stocks fluctuating between gains and losses. Right now, the S&P 500 index is higher. The Dow, though, in the red. S&P little changed, up just 1 point right now. NASDAQ up 47. That is a gain of 0.3%. Market forecasters are split on whether the rebound has further to go amid risks from trade war, economic slowdown, and sticky inflation. S&P, as I mentioned, a little changed, up just 1 point, just about flat on the day. The Dow, though, down 35, down 0.1%. And NASDAQ right now up 48, NASDAQ higher by 0.3%. 10-year at 4.30%, the 2-year 4.00%. Spot gold up $10 the ounce to $3,021, up 0.4%. A retreat for crude down 0.4 now, 68.81 a barrel. And Bitcoin up 0.3%, 88,100 on Bitcoin. Tesla shares lower again today, down 0.3%. Tesla sales fell for the 10th time in the last 12 months in Europe, where Elon Musk's politicking and a changeover of the carmaker's most important product have been major hindrances. Again, Tesla shares right now lower by 0.3%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. And Balance of Power continues right now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyles.
All right, Charlie Pellet in New York, thank you so much. Washington, of course, was abuzz yesterday and remains so today on the story that published in The Atlantic by its editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, who detailed his apparently inadvertent inclusion in a group chat on the encrypted messaging platform Signal with some of the most senior members of the Trump administration, who were discussing strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen. And according to Goldberg's reporting, the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, actually shared specific detail as to the planning of these strikes, what the targets were, weaponry that could be used, details that Goldberg himself actually omitted in the article given national security concerns. But Hegseth is not the only character in this story. There's also the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, who started the chat initially and apparently inadvertently added Goldberg, who Donald Trump, the president, is defending as a good man today. And there were others, too, including the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and the Director of the CIA, John Radcliffe. Those two, perhaps unluckily, were already scheduled to appear before the Senate Intelligence Committee today for a hearing, and they faced some tough questions about it. Here's this exchange between Radcliffe and the committee's Democratic ranking member, Senator Mark Warner.
Director Radcliffe, were you on the group chat?
Senator, I was on a Signal messaging group.
So you were the John Radcliffe on that chat?
I was.
Thank you.
Those were procedures that were implemented. My staff implemented those processes, followed those processes, complied with those processes, and finally, just please, so my communications, to be clear, in a Signal message group were entirely permissible and lawful and did not include classified information.
Well, we will make that determination.
One of the more mild exchanges between CIA Director Radcliffe and Mark Warner, the top Democrat on that panel, as Kaylee mentioned. And that's where we start with our political panel today. Rick Davis is back with us, Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital, alongside Democratic strategist Roger Fisk, former special advisor to President Barack Obama. Great to have both of you back with us. Roger, this hearing was supposed to be boring. It was originally titled Worldwide Threats, an open hearing to start at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. Worldwide threats. Is the threat in this case coming from inside the House?
Well, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum, right? So obviously what happened yesterday clears the decks. And I think it's good that these folks happen to be in front of a very highly respected bipartisan committee with Senator Warner really being one of the standard bearers about the conduct that everyone should exercise when around and using classified intelligence. The fact that this Signal can't be downloaded and installed on government phones. So walking into this conversation, we have to acknowledge that these are all these individuals doing this work on their private phones, which is a source of concern. And then the fact that no one took the time to go through and ensure that as soon as that chain became at all detailed, that the logical thing to do would be to say, let's all get on a video conference so that we can talk in a secure environment. That's basically the earliest trigger. As soon as it becomes any kind of a detailed conversation, is to get on a secure video conference. And that didn't happen. And unfortunately, I think it's part of a pattern that we've seen from the administration. But to Senator Warner's point, we'll see how this plays out.
Well, and to seeing how this plays out, obviously the members of the committee, Rick, can ask their questions in however flamboyant a manner they would like to, get the answers from Gabbard and Radcliffe on tape, make as much noise as they can about this. But in terms of actual ramification, is the only person who can cause a head to roll because of this President Trump? Because his indication right now is that he thinks Mike Waltz, who created the group chat, made a mistake, but is a good man. Doesn't seem to be pushing for a resignation or anything like that.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that they don't want to upset the apple cart with their senior leadership, and I can understand that. But at the end of the day, somebody ultimately was responsible for this, whether it's a cabinet member or a committee staff in DOD or the National Security Council. I think every one of them probably should be looking at their procedures because, these intelligence seals have been broken, right? I mean, did nobody in the DNI's office say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be talking about this kind of stuff on a signal chat? Same with all the other agencies. I just think everybody's, sort of situational alertness needs to be reminded that they're handling highly sensitive classified information. And I can't imagine how naming a intelligence official who is, it's against the law to describe them as a CIA operative, is not classified. And that's one of the things that was in the communication. So I think all this debate about what's classified and what's not is sort of beating around the bush. I think everyone, the appropriate response today should have been, yeah, this wasn't the right thing to have done. And we need to find ways of being able to communicate with each other, which is critically important, but do it in a more classified fashion.
Another instance in the naming of that CIA officer where the Atlantic chose not to publish sensitive information here, classified information as the case may be. Roger, you had a top security clearance when you were in the Obama administration. You have a sense of the gravity here, and I'm wondering if we can tug on your other area of expertise, and that's political communications. From a crisis communications standpoint, what is the White House to do here? Do you just duck and cover, let it blow over? Or to Kaylee's point, does Donald Trump need a scalp?
The answer could very well be yes to all of those things. I subscribe to the idea of tell it all, tell it quick. Something as serious as national security, and frankly, any time the list of individuals that are on that chat are having it's classified.
It seems we're having a little bit of difficulty with Roger's connection there. We'll try to work on that. Rick, as we consider not just the way in which this is being viewed domestically and how the administration may need to be messaging what happened here to a domestic audience, I also wonder about another audience that's at play, which is U.S. allies, some of which share intelligence with the United States. There was some revealing dialogue taking place between officials, including the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth about Europe and how they didn't want to be bailing out Europe again when it comes to shipping traffic through the Red Sea. If you're a European ally looking at this Atlantic article, what are you thinking?
Well, their red flags have been up for quite some time. Look, I mean, the administration does carry a burden. I mean, Donald Trump was under indictment for misuse of classified information, in his post-presidency. And so it wouldn't surprise anybody that we would have a problem like this, since the leader of the team, the President of the United States, took a relatively cavalier attitude toward our nation's secrets. So, look, all of this flows down. There's a thing called the Five Eyes, which are our five closest partners, and we share intelligence with them in order to be able to prepare for any contingency. And there has been discussions as to whether or not our cozying up relationship with Russia right now is going to precipitate a pullback from the normal course of business that the Five Eyes conducts by sharing that kind of sensitive information. So we hope not, because that's what helps keep the country safe and the world safe.
Hey, Roger, we got a statement from the White House a little bit earlier. It doesn't mention Signal. The subject line, Trump administration's actions made Houthi terrorists pay. Remembering, it was the battle plans, the attack plans against Yemen that were being discussed in this Signal chat. It says Democrats and their media allies have seemingly forgotten President Trump successfully killed terrorists who have targeted U.S. troops and disrupted the most consequential shipping routes in the world. And then the text goes bold, Roger. This is a coordinated effort to distract from the successful actions taken by the president, his administration, to make America's enemies pay and keep Americans safe. Is this an effective line of response?
Apparently an impossibly coordinated attempt. If we got all those folks to get on a Signal chat and then leak it, To build on Rick's excellent point, we have to put ourselves in the minds of an Australia or a Germany or a France or a Canada. And we have to also remember that the current president in his first administration said that he could declassify things just by thinking about them. So if you have actionable intelligence specifically relevant to Russia, and when you ask Rick about whether or not we're seeing some of our allies pull back, you've got to think that your sources, your methods are all going to be potentially compromised if you share that intelligence with the United States of America right now. And then you add on to that this cavalier attitude that we see in the chat yesterday, which is just not serious, sober national security professionals. I've been in these discussions, and that's not how these people conduct themselves. The backslapping, the chest thumping, etc. Then any reasonable ally would look at that and say, you know what, it's probably better that we don't share that information with the United States of America.
Well, and just finally, Rick, we have about 90 seconds left here on the background of some of these individuals, like, for example, Pete Hegseth, who as defense secretary is actually the one who reportedly shared the plans for Yemen. He was not a government official prior to assuming that position. He served in the military, yes, but he was also a Fox News host. How much is the kind of inexperience of the typical workings of bureaucracy and security protocol at play here?
Look, my preference, I like people coming out of non-government roles. I think sometimes we get stagnation with too many people who've made government their life. So I wouldn't criticize that because, look, if you're smart enough to serve in this role and get through Senate confirmation, you're smart enough to be able to play by the rules and to see traps. And regardless of what this looks like, it could have been just a trap, right? In the sense that, you see something that probably isn't right. Maybe we shouldn't be on signal, but you take action, you do something about it. That's what we need, is just the awareness of our senior leadership to see these kinds of things. They happen every now and then. It's not necessarily intentional, but they've got to take action and say, hey, let's change this to talking on our secure computer system, because that is where we ought to be having this conversation.
All right. Well, we appreciate this conversation with our political panel here on Balance of Power. Rick Davis and Roger Fisk with us today, and we still have much more ahead as we turn to a partial ceasefire agreement between Russia and Ukraine. Differences, though, on the timeline, and we'll get into that next here on Bloomberg TV and radio.
1:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We have got stocks now in the red. Little change. That is the key takeaway at this hour, with the Dow lower, the S&P lower, NASDAQ holding on to a gain of 26 points, up by about 0.1%. But bottom line, stocks are struggling to find direction. The S&P down 1 point, just about flat on the day, but the Dow down 39 now, down 0.1%. Market forecasters split on whether the rebound has further to go amid risks from the trade war, the economic slowdown, and sticky inflation. NASDAQ right now up by 0.1%. The 10-year 4.30%, the 2-year 4.00%. Spot gold down up $11 the ounce, $3,022 on the precious metals. Spot gold right now up 0.4%. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.4%. 68.86 for a barrel of WTI, and Bitcoin up 0.2%. 88,000 right now on Bitcoin. Engine Capital has taken a stake in Lyft and is pushing for a strategic review of the ride-hailing app. This according to a letter reviewed by Bloomberg News. The activist investor has about a 1% stake. That stake said to be worth about $50 million, according to a source. Right now, we've got Lyft, which is based in San Francisco, advancing by 2.1%. Crosstown rival Uber trading lower by 1.7%. Again, recapping, stocks bouncing around, S&P back in the green, barely up by half a point. For on-demand news, 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. Balance of Power continues right now in Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyons.
Charlie Pellet, thank you so much from World Headquarters in New York. As we broke the news shortly after 12 p.m. Eastern Time, news from Ukraine agreeing to a ceasefire in the Black Sea and now implementing, at least according to President Zelensky, a partial energy infrastructure ceasefire. Kaylee, these were two components that we had talked about quite a bit on the road to finding a lasting peace agreement in Ukraine. But we're getting some confusing messaging out of Moscow, making us wonder if the Kremlin and Kyiv are actually on the same page.
Yeah, or if the U.S. is also on that page with the two of them, as they are acting as the mediator here. The Kremlin suggesting that Russia and the U.S. have further discussions to have about the actual implementation of the energy infrastructure ceasefire, and that when it comes to the Black Sea agreement, which they said they did make, it's contingent on the relaxation of sanctions, specifically on financial institutions that deal with Russian agricultural export. So is the deal done or not? And what is the actual timeline here, or the questions that we have?
Yeah, the more we learn, the more questions we have. We explored some of this gray area on the late edition of Balance of Power yesterday with Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S., Oksana Markarova.
We will see with Russia. They have to show it not only by words, but with their deeds.
We heard from President Trump on a potential minerals deal with Ukraine. Just about completed. We'll be signing it soon, he said. Are you really that far along?
Well, you know, as the former Minister of Finance and during my 4 years as an ambassador, I always pushed for bigger cooperation between U.S. and Ukraine. And there are many areas we can do that. I mean, mineral deals is one of them. Energy, infrastructure, innovations and engineering. Everywhere, all the sectors where Ukraine can be a solution to so many global problems and where we together can actually add to security and to prosperity of both of our countries. So our first Vice Prime Minister and Secretary Bessent are in active discussions. And the more we can do together on the economic and investment front, the better for both of our countries. Of course, peace is something that is on everyone's mind. We need for Russia to stop this aggression, and we need to return to peace. But there is a lot we can do together.
Well, you mentioned energy there. Is it going to stop at just the minerals deal? Because we now have the administration floating ideas around controlling Ukrainian nuclear power plants, for example, having an ownership role to play. Can you shed some light on those conversations?
Well, again, as I said, there are many industries where we can cooperate And Ukraine energy is one of the top 4 or 5 industries where Ukraine, even during the war, at the beginning of this full-fledged war phase, Ukraine was exporting electricity. That's why Russia is attacking our energy, because this is one of the competitive advantages that we had. Similar with agribusiness, similar with infrastructure, and again, defense tech and everything else. We really would like to cooperate more with U.S., of course, with European partners and others, but I think there is a lot we can do with American companies.
Ambassador, I just want to put a finer point on a couple of things that we've brought up with the spirit of cooperation in mind, and I understand the sentiment of that statement that you're making. But is a minerals deal about to be signed, or will more negotiations be required? And is an energy infrastructure ceasefire actually in effect? Has it been signed?
Well, we are discussing it very actively. Definitely is not going to be, I mean, I think both teams are very focused on doing it and doing it pretty fast. But of course, you know, as we all know, in investment and finance, I mean, you have to discuss everything. The more you agree and discuss everything before you sign, the better and partnership afterwards. But we're doing it at a very quick pace.
Speaking of quick pace, the White House appears to be targeting for a full ceasefire to start April 20th. Is that a timeline that Ukraine sees as realistic? It's just weeks away at this point.
Well, even more than a week ago, our president said we are ready for it. So, again, it takes 2 to dance. And Ukraine wants this ceasefire. We are ready for ceasefire. We actually want a full-fledged and just peace. You know, but it's not going to be Ukraine that is going to be impediment for that.
That was our conversation, or part of it, with the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova, yesterday. Of course, Joe, today the narrative seems to have changed slightly, although we still lack a great deal of clarity as to the actual implementation of this partial ceasefire. And just getting some headlines out of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where Ukrainian officials still are. Its defense minister saying Ukraine is ready for a new meeting to work out truce details, suggesting there is still things that need to be worked out.
Yeah, we may have been a little over our skis, and by that I mean Ukraine and the U.S. helping them announce these headlines at noontime Eastern today. It's not even 2 o'clock yet, and we have a sense that this may not have been exactly what it appeared. Great timing to have Mara Rudman with us in studio today, joining us here on Balance of Power, professor at the University of Virginia's Miller Center, former U.S. diplomat. Great to see you, and thank you so much for coming. Read between the lines for us here. What feels real at the moment? Did Ukraine speak too soon?
I'm not sure if Ukraine spoke too soon, because the United States had also put out statements.
Yeah.
I think Ukraine is trying to navigate being forward-leaning in terms of responding to what the United States wants and how they want it said and put, and knowing that their Russian counterpart is not doing the same and is perhaps being measured by different terms. So I think that the Ukrainians put out what they had thought they had agreed to, which is the Baltic Sea issue, the Black Sea issues, which, by the way, benefit Russia more than Ukraine. So they were coming in, putting that out, showing their willingness, and the Russians had been silent, and apparently still have come out now more recently with something, but much more measured. So it could be a failure of the United States negotiators to recognize they were in parallel negotiations, that they hadn't gotten Russia. It could be them trying to push Russia further publicly by showing what Ukraine is willing to do. But in any case, it continues to put Ukraine in an uncomfortable position.
Well, and when we consider what Russia said, it was that, yes, they agreed to a Black Sea ceasefire, but it was contingent upon sanctions relief. What do you make, Mara, of the suggestion that sanctions relief could already be coming, despite it not being a full ceasefire agreement?
I make that the Russians believe, at least, that they are calling the shots here, and that they say jump, and the United States says how high, and then translates that to the Ukrainians. So they're trying to get more from a deal. The question is whether they said that in the room to Steve Witkoff and others, or whether they're now saying it after the fact.
At this point, we see a couple of headlines crossing the terminal that I just want to mention. Russia says it is not considering the transfer of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is something that had been floated by President Trump at one point. He said, we're dividing up land, we're talking about power plants. Also announcing the White House here that the president will be meeting with U.S. ambassadors a bit later, 2:45 p.m. And I wonder if the Signal story is going to come up. This is something that we've been talking about. I don't know why else you're corralling all U.S. ambassadors. There's a bit of concern about the way this is being received, not just at home, but also by our allies abroad. The sharing of war plans on the Signal app inadvertently to a journalist. We saw some pretty tough testimony today on Capitol Hill with the two top intelligence officials in this administration, Tulsi Gabbard, CIA Director Ratcliffe, suggesting that classified information was not shared on this app. How do we say that with a straight face?
So I'm glad I wasn't the one in the position of having to say it. Judging from my past experience as a staffer or senior staffer at the National Security Council, I would say that the only way you can interpret that last statement as accurate is if the Secretary of Defense, I think they're pointing at this, for example, on his own, unilaterally declassified information. Okay. For example, information about war planning. He would have had to have moved that information from the high side, the classified side, to what is an unclassified system, Signal, whether encrypted or not. So somehow they may be interpreting that in the process of doing that, that should be read as a de facto declassification.
Would that be borne out in an audit?
It would be if there is that kind of thorough audit. I think some on the Hill want it. It's not clear that others do. I've got to say I was surprised with Chairman Tom Cotton, who is by any measure a war hawk and someone who I'm sure is very careful himself about security operations. I was surprised at his unwillingness to lean into those questions.
Well, we certainly saw the leaning in on the behalf of others, Democratic senators, specifically on this. And I wonder, as we consider the troubling nature of a number of factors of this story, is it so much about the way in which these officials were communicating with each other, or what it may signal in terms of not just internal U.S. government intelligence sharing, but external intelligence sharing with partners who may not want their classified information transmitted through means such as Signal?
Sure. I think it's an all of the above. So certainly what they were communicating was a huge problem. How they were communicating it was a huge problem. And then I would go further to say, in the context of what they were communicating, they showed they have a very different view of who our friends and partners and allies are than is commonly understood. It differs from the history of the United States in terms of the importance of our relationship with Europe, of Canada, of Australia, of those who are in the Five Eyes Agreement, which is not Russia and not China. And yet, in the kinds of language they use and how they talk about things and in what they're doing on these essentially open systems. Signal is encrypted, but it's an open source means of communicating. They're showing an utter disregard for those for whom the United States has traditionally, and I would argue needs to rely in the future. Partnerships are partnerships for a reason.
We got a statement from the White House earlier today. It doesn't mention Signal, but refers to a coordinated effort to distract from the successful actions taken by President Trump and his administration to make America's enemies pay and keep Americans safe. Refers to the Biden administration sitting back as a band of pirates exacted a toll system in one of the most important shipping lanes in the world. Does that give you a sense of how the White House is going to handle this? It doesn't sound like anyone's getting fired.
It gives me a sense of a lack of appreciation, maybe willful lack of appreciation for the seriousness of the situation. It also, I have to say, I did not serve in the Biden administration, but I was an acute observer from the outside. And it's a serious allegations and quite unfair allegations about what the Biden administration did or didn't do with respect to the Houthis. They certainly took a number of actions. You can disagree with the intensity of their actions, but using that kind of language is as problematic as using the language that was reported to be on the Signal chat about European allies.
We just have a minute left, but to the point you were making on the discussions of Europe, Pete Hegseth suggesting they're freeloaders, J.D. Vance saying he doesn't want to bail them out again. Do you see that as a misunderstanding of what actually is at stake in the Red Sea? Because they seem to think it was mostly Europe's problem, that the U.S. didn't really necessarily need to be doing this.
I would view it more broadly as and more in a deeper sense as a misunderstanding of how to best achieve U.S. security and protect the American people. And free international shipping lanes are part of that. And also having a strong partnership with allies in Europe, our NATO allies who have been with us and who have benefited from being with us, but the United States has also benefited in return. So I think you put the United States at serious jeopardy with those kinds of statements and allegations.
All right, former U.S. diplomat Mara Rudman, now at University of Virginia's Miller Center, here with us in our Washington, D.C. studio on this story. Thank you so much. And Joe, as you mentioned, we could get some more on this from the president or from the ambassadors. He is gathering just about 50 minutes from now at the White House in the cabinet room. It seems press will be invited, so we may get some of this live on air.
We thought we might hear from the president today, as this story is one that won't go away and one that we'll keep updating, so stay with us. Bloomberg Business Week is up next. We'll meet you back here 5 p.m. Eastern on Balance of Power, only on Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week Daily with Carol Masser and Tim Stenivek, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
And a very good afternoon, everybody, live on TV, radio, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. This is Bloomberg Business Week Daily. I'm Carol Masser along with Tim Stenivek. And man, we've got a lot going on this Tuesday, March 25th.
Really tough to keep track of this stock rally, or really tough to get the stock rally to continue to go, Carol?
Must find trend.
Looking for direction?
It's a kind of a weird one. We're bouncing around here, guys. Having said that, in the last half hour or so, we've had some developments in the war between Russia and Ukraine. We are expecting some comments from the White House. Yes, the news out of the nation's capital continues in a big way.
And so ahead this hour on Bloomberg Business Week Daily, the latest possible in new U.S. trade salvo, secondary tariffs, what, why, and maybe when.
Yeah, plus on those Trump policies, how tech chiefs and foreign leaders are urging the president to rethink those curbs on AI chips. We're going to get into that a little bit later on.
Also, housing data today, up with a caveat. We got the view from somebody who's smack in the middle of it all.
And you know that little known company, Google?
Heard of
it. You have. We all have. How it's reshaping search around AI as it races rivals, including ChatGPT. That is a big story today.
Hey, speaking of Google, its robotaxi business Waymo is hitting the road and heading to D.C. Are those lawmakers going to be taking a spin in those vehicles?
It's a jam-packed 60 minutes right here on the Bloomberg Business Week Daily. First up, though, let's get a check on that trade. Kind of bouncing around. Here's Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much, Carol Masser. Bouncing around or struggling to find direction. We have got the Dow, the S&P. They are both lower right now. NASDAQ, though, holding on to a gain. NASDAQ Composite Index up 26. We begin there. Up 0.1%. NASDAQ 100 Index doing a little bit better. Up now by 0.2%. S&P lower by 2. 57.64, just about flat on the day, down less than 0.1%. The Dow lower by 69 now, down 0.2%. 10-year 4.30%, the 2-year 4.00%. Spot gold right now up $11 the ounce, 3,022 up 0.4%. While West Texas Intermediate crude oil is lower by 0.4, 68.86 a barrel. Bitcoin, little change there, up under 0.1%, 87,940. A story we're watching here at Bloomberg Business Week Daily. Engine Capital has taken a stake in Lyft and is pushing for a strategic review of the ride-hailing app. This according to a letter reviewed by Bloomberg News. Sources say the activist investor has about a 1% stake. That stake said to be worth about $50 million. Lyft shares right now, they are advancing by 2.3%. They are based in San Francisco. Crosstown rival Uber shares, they are lower now by 1.5%. For on-demand news, 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Masser, Tim Stenivek live here on Bloomberg Business Week Daily. Let's get to something that we really got into or started to get into yesterday as President Trump appeared to invent a new weapon of economic statecraft by threatening what he dubbed secondary tariffs on countries that buy oil from Venezuela to choke off its oil trade with other nations. With more on the what, where, when, and why, with us is Bloomberg News U.S. Treasury reporter Dan Flatley. He's out there in our Washington, D.C. bureau. All right, Dan, what exactly do we know about possible secondary tariffs, and why are they kind of secondary tariffs?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So it appears that Trump has sort of taken this idea of secondary sanctions, which have been around for a while, and his sort of fondness for tariffs, and kind of combined the two. And it's understandable if you look at it from Trump's perspective. He's talked for the last several months about how sanctions could hurt the U.S. dollar, and how he wants to protect the U.S. dollar, and he's certainly made no secret about his fondness for tariffs. And so what he's kind of come up with here, and we're still trying to understand some of the details here, is essentially an idea to use tariffs as a sanction. And one of the features that tariffs as a sanction has that sanctions don't have is the ability to sort of ramp them up and ramp them down depending on how the target nation is responding. So if Trump doesn't get what he wants out of Venezuela, he could take them up to 30% or 40%. If things look like they're improving and he's getting what he wants, he could reduce them. So it's sort of a combination of what he has talked about as his favorite word in the dictionary, this very powerful tool, the tariff, with sanctions, a more traditional kind of use of sanctions. So, it's certainly interesting, and I think just to kind of bring it all together, that a lot of this is aimed at China because China is one of the big buyers of Venezuelan oil. So, it kind of fits into that whole trade discussion as well.
That's where I wanted to get, because we said that it's on countries that buy oil from Venezuela to choke off its oil trade with other nations. It's really just about China, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of folks that have reached out to me since the story went out, we're kind of making that point that this is really about China, and the Chinese, some Chinese officials did respond to the story and opposed the use of what they call or characterize as extraterritorial use of U.S. economic statecraft tools like sanctions and tariffs and things like that. And so basically what we know at this point is Trump has imposed successive rounds of 10%, two successive rounds of tariffs of 10% each on China. So we're at 20% right now.
Okay.
And if these tariffs were to go into effect, these secondary tariffs, then we'd be looking at potentially an additional 25% on top of that. So, we're talking about 45% tariffs on Chinese goods and services potentially. But, we still are kind of sorting through some of those details here. And of course, all of this stuff is very much subject to change depending on how the government in Venezuela responds, what Trump thinks he's getting out of them, and all of that. So, it's like many of the things that have been rolled out in the last couple of months, it's all kind of subject to change.
How is this enforceable, Dan?
Well, it's a good question. Sanctions are primarily enforced really by the banks and the big financial institutions who safeguard the channels that are used to transmit money and other forms of transactions under a fear of penalties, big fines and stuff like that imposed by the U.S. government. Secondary tariffs would in theory be potentially imposed or enforced by a similar mechanism, but it would have to be kind of set up in a new form because this has never really been tried before. So I think that all of these details are sort of things that will have to be ironed out. But again, this is assuming that they ultimately go into effect as announced.
I think about kind of longer term in terms of the implications. Can we expect some kind of retaliation? I'm curious how we are kind of gaming out what we might get then from China.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spoke last night with somebody who worked in the first Trump administration who raised this point, which is if secondary tariffs are used more frequently, it does kind of give other countries the option of using tariffs in retaliation for the secondary tariffs, which they don't necessarily have in the same way with sanctions. So there's a retaliatory element to this that becomes more operative, or whatever you want to call it, with tariffs than might be the case with sanctions. So that is kind of an interesting wrinkle in all of this, and so we'll have to kind of see how this plays out.
I mean, Dan, tariffs make so much sense for the United States, be it President Trump or somebody else, because we buy so much. Is that also fair in terms of how we think about this? And this is why maybe it's making it all so uncomfortable globally. We buy so much stuff.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, Stephen Myran, the president's chief of the Council of Economic Advisors, made this point yesterday when he was here speaking with my colleague Saleha Mohsen about the fact that the U.S. does buy so much from other countries, and so we do have a point of leverage there. I think what Trump has kind of identified as well is that, even if these tariffs don't work, if they don't have the intended effect like a sanction might, you still get some revenue, in theory, from the tariffs themselves. So it's kind of a win-win situation in his mind. So I definitely think that gives the U.S. some leverage, but it does potentially have some unintended consequences, as we were talking about with the retaliatory tariffs.
One last question, Dan. So again, another reason for us all to focus on April 2nd next week?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, April 2nd is, as Trump has described it, Liberation Day. So we're expecting some more tariffs, some reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd. There's been a lot of activity behind the scenes, and my colleagues have done some great reporting on this about how within the administration there's sort of the hawks, the trade hawks, and some people who are more of a moderating influence that are all kind of trying to make sure that this works in the way that it's intended. And just by sort of doing that, and by sort of following the letter of the law, by making sure that you're on solid legal footing, it does appear to have somewhat of a potentially moderating effect on the tariffs themselves, because you want to make sure that when you put tariffs in place, that they stick, that they work, and that they're not subject to legal challenges and other things like that. So that does kind of appear to be limiting the scope of maybe some of the maximalist tariffs that we were expecting a month or two ago. But you know, caveat emptor, Trump could, you know, with the authorities that he has, impose still very stiff tariffs, you know, basically, you know, on his own discretion, at his own discretion, and that is something that I think still has markets a little bit nervous.
All right, good stuff, and so glad we could check in with you, Dan. Thank you so much, Dan Flatley. He's U.S. Treasury reporter here at Bloomberg News. He is joining us from our D.C. bureau. There's a lot of news coming out of Washington and really around the world, but Washington's certainly watching some stuff on the geopolitical front as well.
Yeah, to that end, the U.S. said Russia and Ukraine have agreed to a ceasefire in the Black Sea and to work out mechanisms for implementing their ban on strikes against energy infrastructure. We got some separate statements from the White House earlier today, I should say. The White House said that 3 of the technical level talks in Saudi Arabia with teams from Russia and Ukraine had yielded agreements to ensure safe navigation in the Black Sea. The sides had also agreed to prevent the use, Carol, of commercial shipping for military purposes. This according to a statement from the White House.
All right, it's something we certainly want to talk about with our Nick Wadhams, and we also want to talk about one of the most read stories on the Bloomberg. This has to do with the curbs that the U.S. has imposed when it comes to the world of semiconductors, especially those related to the world of artificial intelligence. So let's get to it. To our Bloomberg News national security team leader, Nick Wadhams, he too in our Washington, D.C. bureau. I do feel like we have to start with Russia and Ukraine. It feels like, Nick, another step forward. What can you tell us about kind of the latest developments and what it maybe means?
Well, the big question is how much this is actually a step forward and just sort of a play for time from Russia. I mean, as you noted there, looks like there is progress here. We will have a promise from both sides on a potential ceasefire in the Black Sea that would allow shipping to go through the Black Sea. This is aimed at allowing Russia to have better access to the global market for agricultural products and fertilizer. Obviously grows a lot of wheat, a huge supplier of fertilizer for Europe and elsewhere. But then there's that big caveat there at the bottom where Russia says, listen, if you want us to do this, you have to lift all these sanctions. Agriculture has been a very heavily sanctioned sector for Russia. So, I mean, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, of course, if anybody's going to want to do business with these Russian companies, they're going to need to lift sanctions. But on the other hand, it's sort of what you'd think of as like a chipping away at the sanctions regime on Russia. And that's going to be seen as a major concession to Vladimir Putin.
Well, so what is Russia getting out of this, Nick, if this does actually come to bear?
Well, obviously, for one thing, they'd be getting money, so access to global markets for fertilizer, agricultural products, which would be a pretty big deal. But then I think the bigger issue is what Vladimir Putin really wants is a sort of reintegration into the global economy, into global financial networks, but also reintegration into what is considered acceptable and polite society, if you will. I mean, for so long since the Ukraine war, and even dating to before that, there was really a sense that Russia had been banished for all of its acts of aggression over Crimea, over Georgia, over Ukraine earlier, and then the latest, the full-scale invasion, that people didn't really want to interact with Russia, that they wanted that they were not fit to be integrated. They got expelled from the Group of 8, which then became the G7. So this is, I think what you're seeing is Russia hopes this is one small step toward reintegration into financial circles with potentially and hopefully for President Vladimir Putin for more to come.
Got to say, Nick, I'm a list maker. When I've got to get something done, sounds like there's still a lot on this list to getting peace and a full ceasefire.
We are, I mean, there is hope, obviously, by some Trump administration's officials that you could see a ceasefire relatively quickly, but there are so many details to be worked out. So you had a temporary ceasefire for 30 days, the proposal not to hit energy infrastructure, but we haven't really seen any detailed conversations about getting that done. If you have a full ceasefire, there are all sorts of questions there. Russia says they don't want weapons to flow to Ukraine. You'd have to figure out how you monitor that ceasefire. Do you bring in peacekeepers? This is all stuff that would take very detailed technical negotiations. So far, there's no real indication that either side is ready to commit to that kind of agreement, which would really require massive concessions. I mean, you should say Ukraine has said, listen, we are ready for a full ceasefire. Just halt the fighting. It's very simple. Big question there is, how do you monitor it? And then what happens if someone violates the ceasefire? What then?
All right, speaking of negotiations, I want to get to one of the most read stories on the Bloomberg about some senior executives, both at tech companies and some foreign companies, who are asking the Trump administration when it comes to the U.S.'s strategy in global semiconductors, especially as they relate to AI. What's going on? Who's been in D.C. or calling the White House? What do they want?
Well, the big question here is you have these extremely advanced NVIDIA chips that really are it's super important, crucial for AI, that you can't build these massive AI models without the chips to fuel them. And those chips really do depend on NVIDIA. But the U.S. has imposed very stringent export restrictions on who should be allowed to get those chips, what responsibility they would have, what the security concerns are around that. So you've seen a real pressure campaign, a lot of lobbying from the Trump administration to the Trump administration, saying basically, hey, you guys say you want to spur business, you want to spur investment, you want to cut regulation, give us access to these chips that President Joe Biden put really severe restrictions on right as he was leaving office. And the big country that's doing that is the United Arab Emirates. Their national security advisor was here last week, making a really strong push, saying we're ready to invest $1.4 trillion in the U.S. economy, but you got to give us those chips.
But it raises the question, Nick, how do you make sure that the U.S. stays ahead when it comes to this technology if these chips are able to flow unrestricted to the rest of the world?
Right. Well, I mean, I don't think there's anyone talking about totally just all bets are off, unrestricted access to these chips, but it is a big concern. And one of the things the administration has done is said, listen, we won't give you these most super duper high end chips, but we will give you these other chips that are pretty darn good, but they're not quite as high end. And that's all part of this strategy to keep China several years behind, particularly that's really aimed at China, given that China has the resources and the wherewithal to really invest a lot of research and time in these chips. But, right now we've seen China making a lot of gains themselves, and there are a lot of questions around this U.S. strategy. Would it work at all? Can the U.S. stay ahead for so long? And is it a realistic strategy not only to say, okay, when we run the race, we're going to stay ahead of you, but we're also going to kneecap the other guy as we go along? And there are a lot of people who really disagree with that sort of an approach.
Hey, Nick, real quickly, 30 seconds. We'd be remiss not to ask you about this exposure of private texts between top U.S. officials in their planning for strikes against Houthi militants. 30 seconds. What do we need to know right now at this hour?
Well, we had the two top U.S. intel officials, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, CIA director John Ratcliffe, testified today. They said, listen, there was no disclosure of classified information. We didn't really do anything wrong, but there is a big investigation underway. So you can expect someone's going to take it over this one.
It's a good thing there's nothing going on in your world, Nick Wadhams. Thank you so much. He's Bloomberg News National Security Team Leader. Hey, coming up next, everyone, big changes are underway for the Internet's most popular product. This is the Bloomberg Big Take, and this is Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
It's 2:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We begin with a developing story headline right now on the Bloomberg Professional Service. Sources tell Bloomberg AT&T is in talks to acquire Lumen Technologies' consumer fiber operations. Those sources say the companies are in exclusive discussions about a transaction valuing the unit at more than $5.5 billion. Right now, we're looking at AT&T shares. They are higher by 1.2%, but a major sell-off for Lumen, L-U-M-N on the ticker. Lumen right now down by 13.8%. Again, the headline bears repeating. AT&T said to be in talks to buy Lumen's consumer fiber unit. The companies are discussing a transaction valuing that unit at more than $5.5 billion. S&P 500 index has been struggling to find direction, higher right now by 3 points, up by about 0.1%. Swinging between gains and losses, we've got the Dow down 39, a drop there of 0.1%. NASDAQ holding on to a 62-point gain, up by about 0.3%. 10-year 4.30%, the 2-year 3.99%. Gold up $8 the ounce, $3,019, up 0.3%. A retreat for West Texas. Intermediate crude down 0.3, 68.93 a barrel, and Bitcoin just about flat on the day at 87,840. Trump Media and Technology Group higher on plans to work with Crypto.com on a lineup of made-in-America investments. Those products will be available this year in the U.S., Europe, and Asia, pending regulatory approval. Shares of DJT right now, we've got shares of that company up by 6.2%. Again, repeating our top story, AT&T said to be in talks to buy Lumen's consumer fiber unit. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Well, for more than 2 decades, Google search has definitely ruled the web. Search is also Google's beating heart, generating more than $198 billion in revenue in 2024, almost 60% of Alphabet's annual sales. Tim, though, enter into the AI race, ChatGPT and more, and Google is searching for its next game.
It is the cover story of the new upcoming issue of Bloomberg Business Week, which you can read now at Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg terminal, and soon on newsstands. To get directly to this story, just go to Bloomberg.com/businessweek. It's also the big take, which means our editorial team has singled it out as a must-read for all, and I absolutely agree with that. The reporters on the story, Bloomberg News technology reporter Julia Love and Bloomberg News big tech reporter Davey Alba. Julia is in our San Francisco bureau. Davey here with us in our New York studio. Julia, I do want to start with you because Google is synonymous with search. We Google things. It's a verb now. It's ubiquitous. It's dominant for what seems like forever. That was then, but there are some new players in town. Enter the AI era. What's going on?
Yeah, so the search market has really gotten a lot more interesting over the past few years. There's been a rush of new players. A lot of people use ChatGPT for search. There are also startups like Perplexity, and those new companies have really challenged Google to use generative AI to rethink what the core product should look like for the first time in many years.
So what's kind of wild, Julia, is that it sounds like Google and Alphabet had an opportunity to maybe beat ChatGPT at its own game, and yet it kind of passed. Take us back there.
Yeah, so with this story, we are really shining a light on the attempts that Google employees made to incorporate generative AI in search, to have a chatbot that would provide answers alongside links. They were trying to do this well before the launch of ChatGPT. Google invented the AI technology that makes this possible, but the search team that proposed this encountered a lot of resistance internally. The company was really loath to reconsider its business model. They also had some concerns about the accuracy, just because Google is held to such a high bar. It's a critical utility, not just a fun novelty like a startup might be.
Well, Davey, the story also explores, over the last couple of years, the complaints that people have had when it comes to Google search, and the idea that it hasn't become as useful for some people because of the way that publishers and website developers have really started to game the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that we explore in the story. Even before generative AI sort of exploded onto the scene, there was already a sense that you could make Google more useful than it just on its own by doing things like typing your search query and then adding Reddit. And then, Google was also contending with site owners and sort of spammers who just knew Google's rules and wanted to game the system to get right up top on search results. But those results weren't necessarily the best quality results. So that was sort of the scene in which, ChatGPT came on, and then Google also had to figure out how does it respond to this existential threat and also improve itself so that some of these quality issues are addressed. And I think it's kind of an open question whether people like what they're doing with generative AI. Because of market pressures, they have added on these generative AI features, whether or not users have asked for them. And right now, a lot of the things that would have been, sort of experimental in the past or that Google might not have launched because it has such a high bar on accuracy.
Right.
That's right in the main product.
You
right
like
now.
it, Carol.
What? Google?
Yeah, the Google AI search
The
result
AI
return.
overview?
At the top. I know you like it.
I do good because Tim was like, "Where did you get this from?" But I'm doing, take us in. I feel like when we do a big tech story and there's disruption going on, and execs were pitched something and they kind of pass. There's internal discussions about, hey, we kind of missed the mark. Take us inside Alphabet, Google, and what's going on right now. Are they being like, wait a minute, the employees, we've got this. We need to move on.
Yeah, so Google is coming off of a rocky few years. Davey and I have heard from our sources that ChatGPT really sparked a panic inside the company. It was very painful for Google to see someone else taking its invention and finding, the product hit. And so they've really turned up the heat on their employees to ship products faster. And the woman really at the center of it all when it comes to search is Liz Reed. She's in the top search job now. And what's interesting about her is she's a longtime Google executive, but she's spent most of her time in Google Maps. And so that means that she's a little bit less wedded to some of the old ways of doing things in search. She's a little more willing to experiment. And I think that sensibility has really come in handy as Google kind of enters this new era.
I think what is wild, and I think we've seen this, was it with either electric cars or something? Tim will remember better than I will. But you guys write in the story, one thing that really stung about ChatGPT's rise was that it was built on Google's own inventions. OpenAI's chatbot uses an AI architecture that Google detailed in a now legendary research paper published back in 2017. I mean, Davey, we've seen this before, where all of a sudden, a company had the research and then passed on it. I mean, that's got to kill.
Absolutely. I mean, Google runs two of the most advanced AI labs in the world, Google DeepMind, which has since joined into Google DeepMind, I should say. And a lot of the AI developments that they have rolled out over the years has been really under the hood of these consumer-facing products. So, AI is something that CEO Sundar Pichai has said he wanted to orient the company around even by the mid-2010s, but not the kind of generative AI that we see in ChatGPT and, major products today, but more like improvements to search that are under the hood. Things like making search faster,
right.
Making it more, return more relevant results, things like that. It really stung when ChatGPT came out and became so popular among the public.
Well, you two make the point in the piece that he thinks that we're at the really, really early innings when it comes to AI's effect and AI's role, not just on the company, but also on the world and the way that we interact with the world. Julia, it makes sense that Google would be so protective of Google.com and what its search page looks like. After all, it accounts for so much of the company's revenue and profit. It's really the thing that they need to guard. That said, what are they doing moving forward in a few months that will potentially upend the way that consumers see search results?
Yeah, I think that we see Doodle testing a few different paths right now. It seems to me like they aren't entirely certain yet of what the best way is to incorporate this into Doodle search. They've got the AI overviews, which Carol is a fan of, where they're often topping the search results with an answer that was drafted by artificial intelligence. Those are there whether or not you choose them. They just appear automatically. But then they've also announced that they're experimenting with this new tab called AI mode that you'll be able to click to, similar to photos and the other, features in Doodle search. And you'll be able to go there for kind of like a ChatGPT-esque experience, like when you really want to go deep and have a back and forth with Doodle's artificial intelligence to explore a particular topic. And so I think it's interesting to see them rolling out that dedicated mode, and we'll see how that goes over. People who pay for Doodle's premium AI features are getting an early crack at it now.
I mean, we talked some numbers at the introduction to you guys, $198 billion in revenue in 2024, search. Whenever they report earnings, we go to those search numbers because at the heart of their business, that's what it's all about. Julia, I want you to first weigh in on this. This cover story, how important is it that Google gets this right as the world continues to move forward and embrace AI?
It's critical. I think that the success of the company depends on it. Doodle has made some progress in recent years in diversifying its revenues. Doodle Cloud is now profitable, which was a big win for them. But search is still the heart of the company. They need to remain relevant to users' daily lives. They still want to be that thing that you turn to reflexively when you have a passing question. And analysts have begun to tell Davey and me that they are concerned that search growth going forward may start to level off a bit.
We know things can change. Remember AOL? I mean, and other things, I'm just going to say, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's what happens.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Davey, got about 30 seconds left. Your final thoughts on this story and kind of what comes next?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this story shows what a critical piece of infrastructure, in a lot of ways, Google search is to the web. And as AI marches forward, what is sort of the future? Google is a reflection of the web, and it's also sort of, a utility to explore the web. But if both are degrading, which is sort of the sense that we get from our sources, then what next?
Yeah, it's a big question. This is why it's such an interesting time period when we look at all of these big tech players. Davey, thank you so much. Davey Alba, big tech reporter at Bloomberg News here in studio. And of course, Julia Love out there in our San Francisco bureau. She is our technology reporter here at Bloomberg News.
Check out their story, Bloomberg.com/Big Take. Still ahead, a check on the key part of the U.S. economy. We're talking housing. It's Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
This is Bloomberg Business Week Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
All right, yes, indeed, everyone. A very busy Tuesday. Right now, we do want to head to Washington, D.C., the White House, the Cabinet Room, where President Trump is meeting with U.S. ambassadors.
Congratulations, Devin.
Next, sir, we have a presidential memorandum for your attention. This memorandum requires the immediate declassification of all FBI files relating to the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. This was obviously one of the instances of the weaponization of law enforcement, powers of prosecution against you and others. We believe that it's long past time for the American people to have a full and complete understanding of what exactly is in those files.
Which gives the media the right to go in and check it. You probably won't bother because you're not going to like what you see. But this was total weaponization. It's a disgrace. Should never happen in this country. But now you'll be able to see for yourselves, all declassified. Is that correct? Would you say? All declassified?
Yes, sir.
Everything?
The FBI file with there's a classified annex, but other than that, this will put everything in the public eye.
Is anybody going to look? What about you? You going to look? And frankly, the FBI should be ashamed of themselves, and so should the Department of Justice, and so should Biden. Okay?
Next, sir, we have an executive order for your attention. We've taken action against a number of law firms that have participated either in the weaponization of government, the weaponization of the legal system for political ends, or have otherwise engaged in illegal or inappropriate activities. The law firm of Jenner and Block is one of these law firms. This is a law firm that, as you know, employed Andrew Weissman after he came off of the Mueller investigation. It's a law firm that's engaged in invidious racially and sexually discriminatory practices. It's also a law firm that has participated in the weaponization of the legal system against American principles and values. And we believe that the measures in this executive order will help correct that.
And Andrew Weissman is the main culprit?
He's certainly...
With respect to this firm?
He is one of a number of reasons that we believe this executive order is warranted.
He's a bad guy. Okay.
Next, sir, we have an executive order for your attention relating actually to government payments. Historically, checks issued by the Treasury are, I believe, 14 times more likely to become the subject of fraud than electronic transfer payments. This is an executive order that's going to push the Treasury Department to modernize its payment system to ensure that where possible they're using electronic methods of payment as opposed to paper checks in order to reduce waste, fraud, and abuse in the government, which is obviously an endeavor that we've been pursuing in numerous aspects of government under your leadership.
It's basically modernization of equipment and methods, and it's something that really I think he's going to be a great Secretary of the Treasury wanted, Scott, and so we're doing this, and we have other modernization programs going on. We could let somebody else, whoever's next, whoever that may be, do it, but it's something that should have been done 25, 30 years ago. Okay.
Along similar lines, sir, this is an executive order. We're calling it Protecting America's Bank Account. The basic idea here is that instead of having lots of different departments and agencies and offices issuing payment, often without justification, often without any provided rationale, we're going to be centraling payment processes where possible in the Department of the Treasury and ensuring that measures are taken in Treasury against waste, fraud, and abuse to ensure that money that's leaving the public Treasury is as protected as it possibly can be.
All right, good. Many of these things should have taken place decades ago or longer.
Lastly, sir, we have an executive order for your attention on the very important subject of election integrity. We believe that this executive order is the farthest reaching executive action taken in the history of the Republic to secure our elections. Among numerous other aspects of this executive order, this is going to cut down on illegal immigrants on the voter rolls, ensure that the Department of Homeland Security and the data that they have available is being fully weaponized to ensure that illegal immigrants aren't voting. This will include a citizenship question on the federal voting form for the first time. This executive order instructs the EAC to cut federal funding to states that don't take reasonable steps to secure their election. This calls on the Department of Justice to vigorously prosecute election crimes, particularly in states that we don't believe are in compliance with federal law around election integrity. I could go on for a while, sir, but compliance with National Election Day rules, cracking down and investigating and prosecuting foreign interference in our elections, revoking President Biden's Executive Order 14019, which essentially weaponized government to corrupt and pollute our election process. There's a lot in here, but we believe that these are very important steps that we need to be taking as an administration at your direction to ensure that our elections are as secure as they possibly can be.
Okay, you all understand that? Yes. Election fraud, you've heard the term. We'll end it, hopefully. At least this will go a long way toward ending it. There are other steps that we will be taking in the coming weeks, and we think we'll be able to end up getting fair elections. Perhaps some people think I shouldn't be complaining because we won in a landslide, but we got to straighten out our election. This country is so sick because of the election, the fake elections and the bad elections, and we're going to straighten it out one way or the other. And it's an honor to sign this one. To sign all of them, but to sign this one is a great honor. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Sorry, sir. So we're going to go around the room a little bit quickly, and we're going to introduce these very outstanding people. They've had, in all cases, outstanding careers. They're very incredible people that are going along as rapidly as the system can go along. We're ahead of, I guess, anybody else thus far. So I want to thank John Thune. He's done a very good job, and the whole Senate. We're being delayed as much as possible by Democrats, but that's standard. It gets to be just standard. But the process is moving along very quickly. So Sergio, just say hello, and then we'll introduce everybody.
Absolutely. Sergio Gorham, Director of Presidential Personnel. It's been an absolute pleasure again to know every one of you every step this way. As the President said, we're at a record pace. We have more nominees today from the Senate than at any previous point, over 70, and that's a record in 2 months. And we're proud of that, and we're determined to ensure the world has America First patriots in all of our posts.
Charles Kushner. I'm going to France and Monaco, and proud to serve under the greatest president of our country. Very proud to serve.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
James Blair, honored to work here in the White House as Deputy Chief of Staff. And Mr. President, I think that all of these successful people would want to go serve the United States under your leadership as a testament to your vision and leadership.
Thank you, James.
I'm David Perdue. I'm going to the People's Republic of China, and it's my honor to represent President Trump, people of America, represent our interests and values in China.
I'm Leah Campos. I'm going to represent the President in the Dominican Republic. Mr. President, thank you for the honor to serve you in the Dominican Republic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor. Look forward to working with every one of you on behalf of the President, his leadership, and the American people.
John Arrigo. I am going to the Republic of Portugal, and I'm very excited to do so and serve on what I consider one of my closest friends and one of the best presidents this country has ever had. Thank you.
Kevin Cabrera, nominated to be Ambassador to Panama. It truly is an honor, President, to be part of your administration.
Thank you.
Tom Barrett, nominee to the Republic of Turkey. Delighted and honored to be with you, Mr. President, in that host country, which is one of the most ancient in civilization, is in search for your peace, prosperity, and security program.
Good place.
Mr. President.
Good leader, too.
Yeah, Mr. President, thank you. It's an honor. I'm Pete Hoekstra, you know that.
but I am going to Canada. I look forward to serving you in Canada and your agenda.
And you do a great job. Thanks, Pete.
Juan Johnson, sir, thank you for the nomination to represent you and the United States to the United Mexican States. And I'm really encouraged by some of the conversations you've had with President Sheinbaum recently and to the increase in support that we've seen out of her government along our border on the important issues. So thank you, sir.
They have stepped it up a lot, Mexico and Canada, so see how it works, right?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Matt Whitaker from Des Moines, Iowa. I'm proud to, as soon as I'm confirmed, go represent you at the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Okay, thank you, man.
George Glass, on my way to Japan. Previous administration, I served for you in Portugal. It is a great honor to be able to do this the second time. Thank you
very
for
much.
the opportunity.
Thank you, George.
President Trump, my name is Ken Howry. I'm your nominee to be ambassador to the Kingdom of Denmark, a very close partner and ally. I served for you last time for the Kingdom of Sweden. I want to thank you for the faith you've placed in me as your nominee to Denmark.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
President Trump, thank you for the honor of a lifetime. My name is Stacey Feinberg, and hopefully I'll have the honor of serving in Luxembourg. And I think this is the greatest presidency and the greatest time in history, and it's all because of you.
Thank you very much.
Nicole McGraw, nominated to serve in Croatia, and it's such an honor to be here with you today and to serve you and the American people.
Thank you very much.
President Trump, thank you very much for your nomination to the Republic of Chile. And let me tell you, Border Patrol agents are so thankful for everything that you've done for them. But
That man knows more about the border than anybody, I want to tell you. Thank you.
President, it's a great honor. Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Good
Good
luck.
afternoon, Mr. President. Brian Birch. If I'm confirmed, I'll be representing you at the Holy See. And Catholics are very proud of your work. Your team is doing an excellent job, so thank you. Very honored to serve.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, thank you again for the honor, the greatest privilege. My name is Summer Sparkus. I will serve this great man at the Republic of Malta. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Joe Popolo from Dallas, Texas. Very proud to serve you at the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the very first country to recognize the United States 250 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if I'm confirmed, I will be representing you in the state of Israel. It will be an extraordinary honor, and you've done more for Israel than any president in any time of its history, and we are grateful. And I'm hoping I'll get to be there by Passover.
Thank you, Mike. And Mike is an outstanding guy. They all are. Mike, I think he's going to do wonders for Israel. He actually probably gets along with both sides, and that'll be interesting to see. But the world is watching you, Mike, so good luck. Good luck. You're going to do well. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, thank you for this great honor to serve the Republic of Italy and San Marino. I'm so looking forward to going over there and working with that great ally, and for the pleasure to serve you. Your staff has been great working with us and have done a great job, and we really appreciate them. Thank you, sir, for pushing this along.
And have a good time. A really good time.
I'm Warren Stevens from Little Rock, Arkansas, and I have the honor to represent the President and the United States in Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and to be chosen to go to such an important ally of ours is, I know, sir, and I'm looking forward to it, but thank you for the honor.
You're going to do fantastically. These are tremendously successful people, and you two guys, and then you add on Mike. I think they have a little more money than Mike, but he's got some other advantages. He's got some other, like upstairs, he's got some big advantages.
Yeah, he does.
It's very exciting. It's really exciting to have all of you. Would you have any questions, media, for the people that you just saw? So outstanding, and I thought it would be nice to bring them before you. And so if you have any questions, please.
I wanted to ask you about the talks in Saudi Arabia. It sounds like you made some progress on the Black Sea ceasefire. Yeah. Could you update us on that? What happens now?
So we've made a lot of progress on two fronts, on both sections that we call them sections, but they're much more than that, Russia, Ukraine, and also the Middle East, and we'll see what happens. We're in deep discussions with Russia and Ukraine. And I would say it's going well, but it's a situation we should have never had to even think about. Should have never happened. And in the Middle East, that's been going on for a lot of years, centuries and centuries. It just keeps going. And we are making a lot of progress, so that's all I can report. But some very, very big talks are going and detailed talks are going on right now on both fronts.
Mr. President, you said that your national security advisor learned a lesson after a reporter...
Wait a minute, excuse me, I didn't pick you. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, the ceasefire agreement that was broken today allows for third-party countries to help implement the agreement. What does that look like, and who's going to be involved?
The ceasefire agreement?
Yes, the maritime ceasefire agreement between Russia and Ukraine.
Well, they're going to get together. Look, it's they agreed to something and it got broken. There's tremendous animosity. There's a lot of hatred, as you can probably tell. And it allows for people to get together, mediate it, arbitrate it, and see if we can get it stopped. And I think it will. That'll get stopped.
What countries are you looking to work with, sir, to help implement and monitor that ceasefire?
We have other countries involved, and they're involved very strongly in the process. And that'll be resolved. That's actually, as bad as it is, that's the least of the problems. So we'll get that resolved. And we are being aided by other countries too. Yes, please. Please, Brian.
Tomorrow, the subcommittee on DOGE is going to review funding for NPR and PBS. Now, every Republican president has always promised to take away this money that's going to these two public news outlets. If they're successful, I know Senator Kennedy has backed it, Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress has backed it. Would you be interested in defunding and taking away taxpayer dollars to NPR and PBS?
Well, I would love to do that. I think it's very unfair. It's been very biased, the whole group. I mean, a whole group of them. And frankly, there's plenty. Look at all the media you have right now. There's plenty of coverage. I was from a different age, and they spend more money than any other network of its type ever conceived. So the kind of money that's being wasted, and it's a very biased view. You know that better than anybody. And I'd be honored to see it end. We're well covered. Look at all the people that we have here today. We're well covered, and we don't need it. And it's a waste of money, especially. I don't even know what DOJ's recommendation is. I assume their recommendation is to close them up.
Well, after they hear all the testimony, I think they're going to make a decision relatively sooner than later.
Yeah.
But we'll see what that turns out.
I can't imagine that they wouldn't, because they have found so much waste, fraud, and abuse. Hundreds of billions of dollars, and just waste, fraud, abuse. You heard yesterday some of the new things that were found. 22 billion just in environment. Billion. You know, if you had 22 million, Warren, it would be nice. But 22 billion put into environmental accounts. One was 2 billion into one account, Stacey Abrams, where they had $100 in the account. And just before I came in, they put $2 billion. And you guys are looking, so you mean 2 million or maybe 200,000? No, $2 billion were put in the account. What do you think of that, Mike? Do you think that's a straight deal? $2 billion?
Just write me the check, Mr. President. I'll take it with me to Israel.
It's a horrible thing, and we have so many of those things. So they've done an incredible job, and the country wants to hear it. I think DOGE is actually very popular because of what's happening. They're hearing about all of these scams and for big, big money. Tremendous amount. And when you add it up, just hundreds of billions of dollars being wasted, and much of it's fraud. You know, we talk about waste, and it is waste and abuse, but a lot of it's fraud
Can I
too.
follow up on something?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I just want to follow up on that. If Planned Parenthood is defunded, would you look into the harvesting of baby organs that they've done throughout the years, and maybe go after some criminal prosecution on that?
Well, I think you're talking about a subject that is a heated subject, and we'll look into it. We're going to look into everything, but that's certainly a subject that's been debated for a long time, and we will look into it, yeah.
Mr. President,
some senators have expressed hope that the White House will support a rescission package to codify some of the DOGE cuts into law. Where does the White House stand on that? And are you making progress?
Which package?
A rescission package to codify some of the DOGE cuts into law.
You know what? It would be great. I think we're going to do that. I think they're going to do it. I think we're also going to be codifying a lot of the executive orders that we've done, which have been very popular. And we're looking at one, I will tell you right now, that I think perhaps will be controversial, but not with the people, and that's sanctuary cities. We're going to end sanctuary cities for some of these jurisdictions that aren't cooperating with law enforcement. They're guarding criminals. They're taking the rights away from the citizens of their state and their city. And we're going to be ending sanctuary cities if we find it necessary to do in certain major areas. And we may just end the entire thing altogether because it's just a way of protecting criminals. And nobody else is benefited by that. And for some reason, Democrats want to keep and they want to shield criminals from being sent back to their countries or being sent to prison. And in the meantime, the crime rate has gone through the roof. Under Biden, it was through the roof. It's starting to come down, but we're taking a lot of people out of here. So we may be presenting you very shortly with a executive order ending sanctuary cities.
Mr. President, are you going to change any of the practices that your national security officials used after a reporter was inadvertently added to a group chat about attacks on Yemen?
Well, I think it's a question I've been asked now, and I've given a few answers, and they've all been the same. We have an amazing group. Our national security now is stronger than it's ever been. We have had a very, very successful, numerous attacks on that area. These are people that shoot down ships, not only our ships, ships all over the world. They're shooting down right out of the water and damaging them badly, or they're going down. They're also shooting anything that happens to be flying in the area. We hit them very, very hard. There was no classified information, as I understand it. They used a app, if you want to call it an app, that a lot of people use, a lot of people in government use, a lot of people in the media use. And I think I'll ask Mike. Mike is here. Do you want to respond to that, please?
Yes, Mr. President. You asked about lessons. I think there's a lot of journalists in this city who have made big names for themselves, making up lies about this president, whether it's the Russia hoax or making up lies about Gold Star families. And this one in particular, I've never met, don't know, never communicated with, and we are looking into and reviewing how the heck he got into this room. But I'll tell you what, the world owes President Trump a favor. Under Biden, global shipping was shut down. Pinprick attacks, months between them, our destroyers being fired upon dozens of times. President Trump took decisive action with his national security team, took out the head missileer, knocked out missiles, knocked out headquarters, knocked out communication sites, and for once, as we hear, as you all hear from every one of our allies, thank God for American leadership again. Thank God for American strength. You're welcome. And look, we had a national security team that was coordinating these efforts. As Director Ratcliffe testified today, his first day on the job, he was introduced to this app on his government systems at the CIA and at the State Department and otherwise. So, look, this journalist, Mr. President, wants the world talking about more hoaxes and this kind of nonsense rather than the freedom that you're enabling. And a key part of our sovereignty is open sea lanes and knocking the crap out of terrorists, which is exactly what your team and Pete Hegseth, a good friend and fellow veteran, is leading the charge on. And it's an honor.
We had a very, very successful, we had a very, very successful evening. And we've had numerous successful evenings and days in that area. The Houthis are absolutely on the run. The worst of them has been killed. This should have been done a long time ago by Biden, but Biden was an incompetent president. He couldn't do anything. He didn't know where he was going. He had no clue. This guy had no clue. This should have been done a long time ago. As they shoot missiles at ships, randomly shoot missiles at ships, and they make their own missiles. You know, this is not an incompetent group of people. They make their own missiles. They get the missiles also from Iran. It's an offshoot of Iran, another offshoot. You have Hamas, you have Hezbollah, you have the Houthis. You got a lot of stuff going on with Iran. And we sent a letter to Iran. You're going to have to be speaking to us one way or the other pretty soon because we can't let this happen. But that's an app that a lot of people use. And somebody got on. I mean, happened to know the guy's a total sleazebag. The Atlantic is a failed magazine. Does very, very poorly. Nobody gives a damn about it. This gives it a little bit of a shot. And I will tell you this, that they've made up more stories, and they're just a failing magazine. The public understands that. He's a very good man. That man is a very good man right there that you criticize so strongly. He's a very good man, and he will continue to do a good job. In addition to him, we had very good people in that meeting, and those people have done a very, very effective job, and you're going to see it. And it goes on, by the way. It's going to go on. And I think the Houthis wish that it didn't happen, but that's what it's all about. We have to create a safe country, a safe world, and that's what we're doing.
Do you worry that national security was put at risk, Mr. President?
Of senior officials using signal.
Do I plan to ban who?
The use of signal to communicate from senior officials.
Well, I don't know what this, I don't know anything about Signal. I wasn't involved in this, but I just heard about it. And I hear it's used by a lot of groups. It's used by the media a lot. It's used by a lot of the military, and I think successfully. But sometimes somebody can get onto those things. That's one of the prices you pay when you're not sitting in the situation room with no phones on, which is always the best, frankly. But you know, the best is to be there. In fact, oftentimes I've been in fact, just last week I was in the situation room on something very important, and we had a couple of people hooked up by line, and I said, cancel the line. Sorry, fellas, what you do is we'll tell you all about the meeting, because I know people do get on those lines, whether it's Signal or anything else. Yeah.
So are you going to change any procedures as a result of this?
Well, I mean, look, we look at everything, and, you know, they've made a big deal out of this because we've had 2 perfect months. We are bringing in business. We have another one announced tomorrow, a big one, very big. Like in the history of our country, nobody's ever seen anything like it. And I think probably a lot of people are saying they started by saying it was the greatest first month that a president has ever had, and I think that's true. And now they say it's the best second month, and they had to find something. And this certainly will look at this, but the main thing was nothing happened. The attack was totally successful. It was, I guess, from what I understand, took place during, and it wasn't classified information. So this was not classified. Now, if it's classified information, it's probably a little bit different. But I always say you have to learn from every experience. I think it was very unfair the way they attacked Michael. He's a good person. The person that was on just happens to be a sleazebag, so maybe that's just coincidence. I don't know.
But you are going to conduct an
Would it be
investigation,
a problem if
Mr.
the
President?
Atlantic released all the text messages if they're not classified?
Well, I don't know. I'd have to ask the military about that, because, you know, maybe you wouldn't want that. I don't know. I will say this, that from what I heard, the man that we're talking about, who's not somebody that I don't think most people have ever heard of, he found it very boring, and he left early. He got off the line very early. So I can't speak to it other than that. So he's made up a lot of stories, and you know, I think he's basically bad for the country. But it's a failing venture, very failing venture. They're very upset, and a thing like this is publicity for them. But I don't think we should allow people that are very good, like that man sitting right at the end of the table, who's done a great job. We shouldn't allow them to be hurt by it.
Mr. President, can I follow up on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you saying you're okay with the continued use of signal by administration officials?
No, that's not what I said. I said we'll look into it, but everybody else seems to be using it. It seems to be the #1 used device or app, whatever you want to call it, and we will certainly look. If it was up to me, everybody would be sitting in a room together. The room would have solid lead walls and a lead ceiling and a lead floor. But, you know, life doesn't always let you do that. In the meantime, the attack itself that we were talking about and discussing has been an unbelievable success.
But you will conduct an investigation, is what you're saying, into this.
We'll look into it, sure.
Who's gonna
I would look into it, sure. I want to look into
Is that the FBI? Or
anything like that. I would ask them. It's not really an FBI thing. It's really something having to do with security. Security, like, will somebody be able to break in? Are people able to break into conversations? And if that's true, we're going to have to find some other form of device. And I think that's something that we may have to do. Some people like Signal very much. Other people probably don't. But we'll look into it. I think, Michael, I've asked you to immediately study that and find out. If people are able to break into a system. Now, in this case, it wasn't that this attack was going on and nobody found out anything. And again, the person that was on, as I understand it, he left very early because he didn't find it very exciting. But I think it's something you should look into.
Yes, sir, we are. We have our technical experts looking at it. We have our legal teams looking at it. And of course, we're going to keep everything as secure as possible. No one in your national security team would ever put anyone in danger. And as you've said, and we've repeatedly said, the attack was phenomenal and it's ongoing. But the media wants to talk about everything else except for the hostages you're getting out of the Middle East, Iran on its back foot, sea lanes getting reopened, peace in Europe. As we just saw today with a Black Sea ceasefire, we were just on with Steve Witkoff, myself, our team in Saudi Arabia. They want to talk about all this other stuff except for your amazing successes and the successes of your team.
One of the other things, and sometimes you have to move very quickly, and there are other devices that are very good, but they are very, very cumbersome, and you're not able to use them and, from a practical standpoint. So all we can do is find out the best we have with modern technology. They'll probably get better over the years. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, on the Black Sea, so the Kremlin has said that there are several conditions that would need to be met for this agreement to happen. This includes sanction relief for banks and some companies. Did the U.S. agree to all of those conditions that they laid out?
They will be looking at them, and we're thinking about all of them right now. There are about 5 or 6 conditions. We're looking at all of them.
The White House has said that it's looking into how a journalist got added to that signal chat. Is it possible that there could be a firing of even a lower mid-level official once that person is identified?
About what?
About the signal chat that we've been discussing.
We've pretty much looked into it. It's pretty simple, to be honest. It's not, it's just something that can happen. It can happen. You can even prepare for it. It can happen. Sometimes people are hooked in and you don't know they're hooked in. They're hooked into your line and they don't even mean bad by it. But it's not a perfect technology. There is no perfect technology. The really good ones are very cumbersome, very hard to access. And I think we're going to look at, we always want to use the best technology. This was the best technology for the moment. But again, it wasn't classified, so they probably viewed it as being something that wasn't that important. And it obviously, with the attack being, I mean, I don't know if it's been read out to you yet, but that attack was a tremendous success for the U.S., a tremendous success.
Who said the information,
Go ahead,
was
please.
not classified?
Do you think that Mike Walton made a mistake, and does he need to apologize?
No, I don't think he should apologize. I think he's doing his best. It's equipment and technology that's not perfect, and probably he won't be using it again, at least not in the very near future. What do you think?
That's sir. I agree with you. Let's get everybody in the room whenever possible.
A lot of times you find out defects by exactly things like that, but I don't think it's something we're looking forward to using again. We may be forced to use it. You may be in a situation where you need speed as opposed to gross safety, and you may be forced to use it, but generally speaking, I think we probably won't be using it very much.
The Secretary of Defense, on that chain, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and J.D. Vance, the Vice President, said that the Europeans were freeloading. Do you agree with that assessment?
Do you really want me to answer?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think they've been freeloading. The European Union's been absolutely terrible to us on trade, terrible. And as you know, NATO, I got them to pay hundreds of billions of dollars. They were way behind. And if you look if you look at Ukraine, so we're in for $350 billion because of Biden. Should have never happened, this war. All these dead people should not be dead. All these broken cities that are demolished down to the ground, those gorgeous towers, the most beautiful in the world, the most beautiful spires in the world. The spires in Ukraine were said to be the most beautiful of all. Just about every one of them is lying on its side in a million pieces. It's so sad to see what's happened to a heritage. No, I think that when they say the European Union and you could say NATO also. Look, NATO, and I don't blame NATO for this. I don't blame Europe for this. I blame Biden for the fact that he didn't make them equalize. And to this day, I said to him, you got to catch up, you got to equalize. But why are they in for $100 billion and we're in for possibly $350 billion? It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. And you could say more important for them because we have an ocean in between. So, you know, it's one of those things. You'll be seeing Liberation Day. I call it Liberation Day in America. You're going to be seeing on April 2nd. Didn't want to do it on April 1st for the obvious reason, April 2nd. But you'll be seeing tariffs. And I think I've been very fair. I have them set. But I think I've been very fair to countries that have really abused us economically for many, many decades.
Mr. President, who told you that information was not classified?
Another question.
Which of your national
Please,
security
go ahead.
advisors?
Just following up on your comments on the economy, there is reporting that consumer confidence fell for the fourth straight month. What is your message to Americans who are concerned about?
Well, I know this, that for the first time in like 50 years, right track, wrong track, we're on the right track. And I think people see that. And if you look at prices, prices are way down. You know, when I first came here, the first time I met with you people officially, they were screaming at me about eggs. I said, I've been here for a week and I'm being yelled at about eggs. Egg prices have come down 45, 50% in the last week and a half. And our Secretary of Agriculture has done a great job. As you know, Brooke, she's done a fantastic job, and others working with her have done a great job. But we brought eggs down at a level that nobody thought we could get at. I inherited that situation, and I inherited a grocery situation. The groceries went way up, an old-fashioned word, but it's a very descriptive word. Groceries have gone through the roof. And I used to campaign on it. I used to say, we're going to get groceries down, and we have got it down. I watched a certain newscast over the weekend, and a congressman, Democrat congressman, said, well, Trump's done a lot. I agree. He's been great on the border. He's been great on the military. But, you know, he hasn't brought prices down. That's false. Gasoline's way down. Eggs are way down. Groceries are down very substantially, but down. Almost everything's down. Now, I'd like to see interest rates come down a little bit, and you're going to see billions of dollars, even trillions of dollars coming into our country very soon in the form of tariffs, because we were abused by presidents that, frankly, in all fairness, it wasn't their expertise, but they had no idea what they were doing.
Mr. President, you say tariffs will create more jobs here in America.
Oh, yeah, sure. It's going to agree. It'll create a lot of money and more jobs. But if you look, so in the last, these gentlemen would know about it, and ladies, because some of the ladies are great businessmen in this room that are becoming ambassadors. Great, really great, top of the line. When you look at the number of companies that have said, like we're close to, I would say close to $4 trillion. We never had numbers like that. The number one chip maker in the world from Taiwan coming in with $200 billion. We have Apple. Look at Apple. $500 billion. $500 billion. They're going to build plants all over the United States. They were all being built in China. You have many, many companies, and maybe above all, you have the car companies coming in at levels that nobody's ever seen before. We have Honda is opening up one of the biggest plants in the world in Indiana, and many car companies are coming in. We have AI. We're leading China by a lot in AI, and we're going to keep it that way because we've made it very good for them, and we're going to protect them. Once they're here, we'll protect them through taxes, through incentives, and also through tariffs. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, everybody, you've been listening to President Trump there at the White House making an array of comments, also signing some executive orders and answering some questions from the reporters in the room on a variety of issues, including Russia, Ukraine, also talking about the recent security breach. Let's get to our own Nick Wadhams. He is back with us there in our Washington, D.C. News Bureau. He is Bloomberg News National Security Team Leader. I care about security issues. You do. The president answering questions on a variety of things, making some comments. Nick, what is news or what is significant you think that the Bloomberg audience needs to know about here?
Well, I think what you're seeing here really is a total lack of apology. So this looks like it was a major security breach. A journalist was accidentally included in a conversation between very senior leaders. I mean, this is the vice president, the national security advisor, director of national intelligence, director of the CIA. I mean, feels like it's a pretty unfathomable thing. What you see the president saying is essentially, yeah, we're going to look into this, but look at the results. We went after the Houthis, we attacked the Houthis, and that's the most important thing. So very much fits with the broader Trump playbook of no contrition and an insistence on the idea that he's getting results, and if they have to break some eggs and violate process as they do that, then that's fine.
That said, he did also say he probably will not be using the Signal app very much. And he also said that he's not familiar with the Signal app, but will look into the use of the Signal app. Did it seem like to you that the president, he did also mention this stuff is better done in a room. That was one of his comments. Did it seem like to you that he was frustrated at all with his national security advisor, with his team for this breach?
Well, you know, if you remember your first Trump administration news flow, one of the telltale signs that someone was in trouble was often the president saying that he had complete faith in that person. And he has now done so with National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Difference this time, though, is that you know, saying that Waltz did something wrong or dismissing him or taking some other action would in itself essentially be an acknowledgement of defeat or wrongdoing, which he and his team have so far refused to do. I mean, and there was a congressional hearing earlier today with Gabbard and Ratcliffe and a bunch of other officials. And some of the senators said, you know, in times past, you would have seen an apology. Yes, we screwed up and we pledged to get to the bottom of this. And they acknowledged that, you know, there had been breaches in the past of far less severity where people had been fired. You're not seeing that in this case. Yes, an acknowledgement that they are going to do a probe, but, you know, they stated flat out in that hearing that there was no classified information shared in that chat and they didn't do anything wrong.
To be fair, some would say this is a president who took very high-level classified documents to Mar-a-Lago. So, you know, it's kind of interesting in terms of maybe what he deems as national security or not. Some would say that. Having said that, Nick, in terms of security going forward, would you expect, will we get maybe even some further clarification that things will be done in more secure rooms going forward?
You know, it's very difficult to tell because the sort of concern around potential violations here has shifted, as you often see with some of these stories, toward attacks on the media, attacks on the Atlantic and the editor who was included in this chat, and vehement denials. Yes, I mean, I do suspect they will take a look at Signal, but, you know, they have already taken that look. I mean, the Defense Department issued a statement last year basically saying we do not believe that Signal is a secure platform and should be used for government communication. Now, they can make the argument that, listen, current intel channels of communication are cumbersome and they need to be able to act fast. But, you know, it's a lot of questions here.
The president spoke for just about a half hour at this meeting with ambassadors. Nick, before we let you go, is there anything that you're chasing, any story that you're chasing following the president's comments there at the White House?
Well, the big question, obviously, is Ukraine. And, you know, we had a conversation earlier about a ceasefire to allow Russia to export some agricultural products and fertilizers. Russia has put a lot of conditions on that. So President Trump said that that was, you know, a victory, but Russia wants a lot of sanctions lifted. So are we going to see the U.S. Basically lift those sanctions as a concession to Russia to get that moving? You know, how quickly is President Trump going to be willing to give in to that Russian demand?
All right, so appreciate it. Double duty for us on this Tuesday. Nick Wadhams, he is Bloomberg News National Security Team Leader there in our Washington, D.C. News Bureau. All right, folks, U.S. stocks at this hour definitely off their best levels. A bit of a mixed trade on this Tuesday. Let's get an update on U.S. stock trading. Let's head on over to Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
All right, I thank you very much indeed. 35 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell with the Dow, the S&P, they're both lower, NASDAQ higher. Right to the numbers here. S&P down a point, little change, meandering, swinging swinging between gains and losses. We've got the Dow down 70, down 0.2%. NASDAQ, though, holding on to a 50-point gain, up 0.3%. 10-year, 4.30%. Spot gold up $7 the ounce. Little change, 30.18. West Texas Intermediate crude also just about flat on the day, 69.08 a barrel, down less than 0.1%. Briefly, Engine Capital has taken a stake in Lyft and is pushing for a strategic review of the ride-hailing app. This according to a letter reviewed by Bloomberg News. Shares of Lyft, they're up by 2.3%. Rival Uber down now by 1.2%. And AT&T is in talks to acquire Lumen Technologies' consumer fiber operations, a transaction value of over $5.5 billion. AT&T up 1%. Lumen down by 13.7%. And that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week Daily. Carol Massar, Tim Stanovic live here at our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Well, our next guest talks to those that are managing billions of dollars in investment, sometimes trillions, who are analyzing the ups and downs and twists and turns of the financial markets, sharing their stories, their journeys, their successes, their mistakes every week on his Masters in Business broadcast and podcast right here on Bloomberg. He manages money as well. He is co-founder, chairman, and chief investment officer of the firm that bears his name. And as an investor is someone who is, yes, interested in how money flows into investments, Tim, and the behavior and data that gets it there.
Barry Ritholtz is also the host of Masters in Business on Bloomberg Radio. He's got a brand new book out. So good, I have 2 copies, one in each hand.
They're all over the newsroom.
How not to invest, the ideas, numbers, and behaviors that destroy wealth and how to avoid them. Barry joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Barry, before we get to the market, or before we get to the book, rather, we got to get your take on the market, today's behavior, sentiment in financial markets, and sort of how this cycle compares to other market cycles of note.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. You know, there's this sort of narrative fallacy, hindsight bias that we all engage in. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but after it happens, we have this perfectly rational explanation as to why. And it was really fascinating. So we just had Trump talking about the Houthis and the signal problem, and hold all that aside. The Wall Street narrative following the election, we had an election, it was decisive, it didn't go on for days as some people forecast. For better or worse, there was a clear outcome, and markets rallied in anticipation of, hey, this is going to be a business-friendly administration. We're going to get tax cuts, we're going to get deregulations. Everybody party, and markets rallied pretty much up until the chaos began with the tariffs. Tariffs are on Monday, they're off Tuesday, they're on Wednesday. It was back and forth. Hey, we're gonna have tariffs with Mexico and Canada. All right, now the tariffs are not with Mexico and Canada. Well, maybe we'll have and then so the narrative was this administration is fostering chaos. Nobody can make a CapEx investment because we don't know what the rules are going to be. We don't know where we want to locate factories. We were told, hey, we could build stuff in North America and it'll be tariff-free. 45 negotiated the new NAFTA agreement. 47 is complaining it's the same guy. So we ended up with this new narrative. Oh, this chaos is bad for business. And then over the weekend, the comments came out from President Trump. Well, maybe we can make these more focused and more targeted, and maybe it doesn't have to be this broad. And on Monday, we had the best day in, I don't know, was that 6 months, a year?
Yeah.
It was a huge 2%. I think the Russell was up almost 2.5%.
Yeah.
And so the narrative changes. And when we're looking at this, if you're about to retire, you have every right to be concerned about all this chaos. But if you're not retiring for a decade, well, then maybe you should look past the next 4 or maybe it's 2 years and worry less about the chaos and worry more about how your portfolio is going to look 6 years after this president leaves the White House.
In your book, you have a chapter titled Bad Behavior, and there's a section why politics and investing don't mix. And so is that mix even a greater risk in the Trump administration? Or no, is it just kind of politics as usual and we'll have to wait to see how everything settles down?
So here's a sentence I never thought I would say, but I'm going to say it. Trump's genius is his ability to capture the attention of the viewing public. Biden didn't have, a White House full of media over every signing, over every executive order, over every random thing. You didn't see that with Obama. You didn't see that with George W. Bush. You didn't see that with Clinton. He is a master communicator, and because of it, the noise level ramps up. When we look at the odds of a recession, odds of a volatility, of a market crash, of a dollar collapse, of a geopolitical event, they were low before January 20th. They're still relatively low, but all of them have moved higher. I'm not saying we're getting a recession, we're getting a crash. I'm not saying any of that. They're still relatively, I want to say, the Wall Street consensus was up from 10, 15% chance recession to 30, 35% now. That means that
It's a change.
It's a change, and it's not in the direction we like.
Right.
But it's not, hey, there's a 68% chance of recession. It's still relatively low. The problem isn't just that it's elevated. The problem is that the chaos is starting to increase the probabilities. Look, no one knows the future, but business people make investments when they have at least a modicum of clarity. Hey, we know what the rules are going to be. We know what the tax code is going to look like. We know here's where we're going to spend our CapEx dollars to generate a return. And when all bets are off, everybody kind of freezes and says, I can't deploy millions or tens or hundreds of millions unless I know, is this going to be tariffed? Is this going to be taxed? What are the rules going to be about this?
Right.
And that increases the chance of an economic slowdown.
Hey, Barry, on the book, it's your first book in what, 15 years?
Yeah, I'm like clockwork. I crank them out. 2040, the sequel.
But
will
it
be
does
out.
coincide with the rise of your firm.
For sure.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering if this is the culmination of what you learned speaking to clients about mistakes that they've made, that their advisors in the past had made before they came over to you. What is it a culmination of?
So I've been writing in public for almost 30 years. And a lot of times, as I've become better known to Wall Street and to the investing audience, when you put something out there, I remember putting out the PIMCO bonus. It was the top of the terminal for 6 months. I got 1 million emails about that. I've done other pieces more recently where there's been, in the beginning of the pandemic, it came out April 1st. People thought it was an April Fool's joke. Don't assume the pandemic ended the secular bull market. So it's nice putting stuff out and generating a response. Early in my career, I would write stuff and you would get crickets. There's a chapter in the book on a very famous cover of Fortune magazine, May 2000, why Cisco is the one stock you have to own. And I wrote something up about it and didn't hear, not even an angry email. It was just, Howard Marks used to talk about in the early days of his notes, they would print them out, fold them, stick them in envelopes, and mail them out. And I said, what was the response? He said, crickets. It wasn't until his infamous Amazon.bomb in late 99 that he finally got some sort of response. And I very much appreciate his journey. So a lot of this is kind of thinking about, I have a huge advantage of having called a lot of people out, or a lot of media and Wall Street analysts and fund managers' statements, or at least noted them, maybe not called them out, but noted them. And now I have the advantage of being able to look back and seeing who was right and who was wrong. P.S. the Cisco column, 20% off its all-time high at the time in May 2000, the stock proceeds to fall over 90%. It is today, a quarter century later, still below where that magazine cover was. So it's fun kind of going back and looking at a lot of these things. A lot of the ideas in there, some came from clients, some came from media, some came from prospective clients. Hey, I'd like to give you money, but you have to explain this to me. So, there's a discussion in there. How come during the pandemic, the market was detached from reality? I drove through my neighborhood and this dry cleaner was closed and this restaurant was closed and all these shops were doing poorly. And the answer was those companies, aren't publicly traded. And even the companies that were publicly traded, airlines, hotels, all sorts of services like that. They're relatively tiny compared to big global multinational companies that aren't dependent on a chain of restaurants. Can't compare to Microsoft or Apple or Amazon. They're global and they're giant.
I am curious, in terms of the conversations you've had over the years and the ones that are featured on Masters of Business, like, are there certain people that, I don't know, changed maybe the way you think about investing that really just struck with you? I'm not going to ask you for your favorite guest because I think that's not fair. I think it's obvious when you talk to people that you really just like talking to these individuals and getting their
They're
stories.
Fascinating. They're absolutely fascinating.
And you really get into their stories, like what makes them tick, or where they grew up and how their professional life came to be. But is there somebody that kind of really stands out for you?
There's a few people that stand out, but look, I'm going to answer a slightly different question than the one you asked.
That's because he likes to ask questions.
There are a number of guests I really have grown to appreciate and adore, and there are groups of people that are just charming and lovely and generous and what have you. But, the first couple of times you hear a billionaire tell you, hey, luck really plays a big role in this, and you need to have humility, it's like, yeah, sure, thanks. The second time, the third time, when the 10th Nobel laureate CEO billionaire says, hey, someone says this is all about smarts and hard work. Howard Marks once said, I went to, I think it was Columbia Business School. Everybody there was smart and hardworking.
Right.
Not everybody there became billionaires, to paraphrase. He goes, sometimes, you just got to be the right place, the right time. You get a little lucky. I'm genuinely shocked how many of these people are just absolutely shockingly humble given their success and willing to talk about, listen, when you tell people the universe is random and sometimes stuff happens and didn't see that come. No one saw the pandemic come. It certainly wasn't in any Wall Street forecasts. 2020, global economy shuts down. By the way, the stock market's going to scream higher, or the Ukraine invasion, or stocks and bonds down double digits. Nobody in 1 year. So within the book, there's a little bit of a theme. Humility is sorely missing on Wall Street, and sometimes you just have to be aware of how random so much of life is. With that kind of weaselly answer, I will tell you, spending time with Danny Kahneman was a delight. I'm a giant fan of Michael Mauboussin. I mentioned Howard Marks. Is there, if you get to spend time with a Dick Thaler, oh my God, he's just charming and delightful and witty, and all these people people are genuinely surprised when I say, the pen is mightier than the sword. The Paul Krugman, how he writes brutal pieces in real life. He's a pussycat. Like, if you met him and didn't know that he was Nobel laureate and Times acid-penned columnist, you would think, oh, that was a really lovely guy. Who is he? and that's my favorite part of hosting the podcast, is just kind of getting to learn who these people are behind the public images.
So what's the mistake that you'd say most people make when it comes to investing?
How they should not invest.
So the biggest mistake we all make is we just interfere with the genius of the market. We interfere with the market's ability to compound wealth over time. Like, if you just allow the market to do its thing and just stay out of its way, you're way ahead of, we know the handful of outliers who have managed to generate above market returns consistently over time.
Warren Buffett comes to mind.
They're household names. Peter Lynch, Jim Simons of Renaissance Technologies. Like, there's a few dozen of them. Jim Chanos of Kinnikos Associates said,
noted short seller.
Right? When he launched his hedge funds in the 80s, there were 100 hedge funds. They all generated alpha. Now there's 11,000 hedge funds. The same 100, more or less, are the ones generating alpha. And so, that's kind of instructive. It is extremely hard to consistently beat the market net of fees over time. And the people who do are rewarded with great success, fame, riches. And a handful of them we know because they're so few and far between.
Really quickly, 30, 40 seconds, because there's tons of investment books out there. How do you want someone to use this book? How should they use this book?
So the question I ask every guest at the end of the podcast is, what do you know today you wish you knew 30 years ago or 40 or 50 when you're first starting out? And someone turned that around on me, and this book is what I would have loved to have when I started, because every mistake in that book I have made and made repeatedly, and had I had that, maybe I would have done better.
You invested $1 billion into gold?
I didn't make that mistake.
Okay, that's in the book.
But I did pass on the seed round of Robinhood, and my friend who did put money into it made $100 million. So I'm a genius.
If you made $100 million, you would still be sitting here with us.
Probably.
Okay.
I love the puzzle of the markets. I'm fascinated by it.
You really do. Fun to get some time with you. Congratulations on the book.
My pleasure.
Barry
Thank you
Ritholtz,
so much.
co-founder, chairman, chief investment officer of Ritholtz Wealth Management. His new book, How Not to Invest, the Ideas, Numbers, and Behaviors That Destroy Wealth and How to Avoid Them. Also host of Masters in Business on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Podcast. You can download it at Bloomberg.com or wherever you get your podcast. Barry, thanks again.
Well, let's get on over to Charlie Pellet, because we got less than 20 minutes to go until the equity markets close on this Tuesday afternoon. Hey there, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much, Tim. We have got the Dow lower, the S&P, NASDAQ. Both are moving higher, keeping an eye on the S&P 500 index, because if we close higher today, it will be 3 in a row for the S&P 500 index. Now, let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. U.S. stocks are quiet today, with the Dow currently down 55 points. S&Ps are a little change, while NASDAQ is higher by 0.3%. The U.S. 10 yield is at 4.31%. Gold is in the green. Oil is little changed. And Bitcoin, that's higher by 0.2%. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were telecom and consumer discretionary, utilities and healthcare were under pressure. And leaders to the upside in the Dow, Boeing and Apple, while Merck fell 5.5% and led to the downside. In deal news, AT&T is said to be in talks to buy Lumen's consumer fiber unit for $5.5 billion. And in the activist space, Engine Capital is said to build a stake in Lyft and push for a review. Wrapping things up, GameStop reports after the bell. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie.
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill Maloney, to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg. Type Squawk, SQUA, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. This is not a toy. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive. It's the question that drives us.
This is the drive to the close.
The funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, TikTok, everybody. You are up to speed on the markets thanks to Charlie Pellet and Bill Maloney. And we're bouncing around here. A little change, though, on the S&P 500, slightly lower in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and just up about 0.4% on the NASDAQ 100. So, yeah, as we kicked off a couple of hours ago, or almost 2 hours ago, markets really searching for some direction here, Tim.
Well, let's see what Julie Beal has to say about this. She's Chief Market Strategist and Portfolio Manager at Kane Anderson Rudnick. She joins us from Santa Monica. We just heard from Barry Ritholtz about sort of the twists and turns of the market since the election. Was yesterday, in your view, a turning point, given the rally that we saw, the conviction that we saw based on potentially more targeted U.S. tariffs?
I think that for sure there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement that, maybe this is really the moment where there's going to be more clarity and we're going to be moving a little bit less quickly and more thoughtfully. I think that still remains to be seen. And I think the much bigger issue is less how the market reacts and more how companies and consumers react, because that's really what's going to be driving the markets on the long-term horizon. And I think you can say to most companies, hey, we're going to add these tariffs. Oh, just kidding, we're not going to do them. You're going to be fine now. I think most capital allocators are like, there's still the risk that this will change really quickly, and I don't want to be caught sideways on that. So I think there's a lot of still underlying concern that even if you do roll back these tariffs and make them less deep or less broad, there's still this underlying concern, hey, I don't really know what's going to be coming down. It hasn't necessarily been well communicated, and I don't want to put myself in a risky position where I'm on the wrong side of that.
All right, so does that mean, Julie, move into cash-like investments, don't play the equity side of things? Like, what do you do then in this environment?
I think your previous guest really said what I truly believe is that it's really impossible to try to time this kind of a market. There is so much desire to kind of create and add value by trading, by moving, by reacting. This is a really good time to be sitting on your hands, frankly. I like the Howard Marks statement, don't just do something, sit there. And I think this is a real sit there moment where as long as you have a portfolio that's put together of good quality companies that are they themselves able to respond to changes in the market, you should be okay. That is better off than trying to position for a very specific outcome.
Well, let's talk about some of those companies that you have your eye on. We always love it when our guests send us stock picks, especially stocks that we don't talk about all the time.
These are not household names.
These are not, well, for me, they're not household names. For you either, Carol?
No.
Okay, Copart, CPRT is the ticker. It's down 3.3% year to date. They provide insurance companies with services to process and sell salvage vehicles through auctions. It's about a $53 billion company.
Yeah.
What's your view?
So, I think, look, we're looking for these companies that have really durable earnings streams, even in trickier market conditions, trickier economies, so that we don't have to be perfectly correct on the macro. And Copart's a great example of that, where if you look at the consistency of their earnings, it's really a demonstration of how competitively protected they are, right? A lot of these salvage yards, these are really not things that you want in your backyard. They're really hard to permit. They're really hard to come by. And so they are a really valuable asset or once you have it in place, and you need to build the scale so that you can run these very large auctions. So they have a lot of competitive protections around them. They're good stewards of capital, and that is the kind of not flashy, not sexy type of business that I'm really attracted to right now.
All right, another one is Verisk Analytics. Hopefully I'm saying it correctly. This is about a more than $40 billion company.
Carol, they're based in Jersey City. It's in your backyard. You should know this company. Literally in your backyard.
I have no idea where they are. I'll have to look for their address. Who are they? What are they? They're up about 4% here year to date.
So you can think of Verisk as this intermediary where they take a lot of the claims insurance data and then sell it back to the insurance companies so that they can do a better job with their underwriting. And that is something that started years ago, I think in the 70s, where the insurance companies got together and said, if we pool our data and compare it, it will be much easier for us to underwrite accurately. And that's where this company kind of came to fruition. So obviously these data assets are extremely valuable, and it's pretty awesome when your customer actually provides the thing that you sell back to them. That's a pretty unique business model. And there's a lot of regulatory barriers around that too. So again, this is a kind of quiet company that not a lot of people have heard about, but I would rate it as among the highest quality that we own.
All right, so that's ticker VRSK, up 4% year to date. A company that's flat year to date, Tyler Technologies. This is a company that's based in Roslyn Heights, New York. It's $25 billion market cap. What's your view?
So Tyler Technologies sells software to municipalities, local governments, and a lot of these, cities have this really big challenge right now where they're not really able to actually have good IT staff and programmers on site. They just do not pay enough for that to really work for them. And many of the solutions that they have kind of cobbled together are homegrown solutions or companies that just don't even exist anymore. Tyler is unique in that they have pretty modern software that they're selling to municipalities, but they really know this customer better than an Oracle can ever speak to them. And so most of these cities are really being able to outsource a lot of their IT to a company like Tyler, who can take that off their hands and run it, in a successful way.
It's funny. There's been so much. In fact, there are a couple columns on the Bloomberg today from our opinion team, Julie, about investing overseas versus continuing to invest in the United States. what's a smart thought about that? What are you doing for your investors? Are you expanding in terms of investments overseas? And just got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we are seeing right now is just a function of Europe just got way too cheap relative to the US. I do think that there's renewed excitement and fiscal spending that's going to be happening. And so that could drive more economic growth. Right now, growth estimates are still better for the US than for Europe, but I think you should be diversified and have exposure to both.
Okay. Which were you maybe saying that 6 months ago or no? Just quickly.
I think, broadly speaking, I think you should have, but you really weren't getting paid for having international exposure for the last like 5-6 years, right? But I think it really makes sense now.
All right. Really appreciate it. Julie Beal, she's Chief Market Strategist, Portfolio Manager at Kane Anderson Rudnick, joining us from Santa Monica, California on this Tuesday. Folks, we're just about 10 minutes away from the closing bell. We're going to wrap it up with our TV colleagues. Right now, we see some buying into the close, so slightly higher across the board. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, yes, indeed, everybody. Just under 7 minutes to go. We're going to head over to our TV colleagues, count you down to the close on this Tuesday, March 25th. This is Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovec live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Canadians, man, when they get down and out, they get pretty tough.
Our own Jacob Lawrence has a story. The country's been on edge since November when U.S. President Trump began threatening to impose tariffs on Canadian goods and started calling for Canada to become the 51st state through economic force if necessary. The pressures prompted Moosehead Breweries, it's the country's oldest independent beer maker, to unveil a specialty product, Drum roll, please.
You want to go through it? So it's a pack of 1,461 beer cans, one for each day of Trump's presidency, Donald Trump's presidency. First one sold within 11 minutes of the product's launch. More than 400 prospective buyers are now on a wait list. It costs about $2,400 US, $3,500 Canadian, includes shipping. The company will send its presidential pack to customers in 3 provinces. The crate, massive. It's about 4 feet wide, 4 feet tall, weighs around 1,900 pounds, about the same as 2 concert grand pianos. And this is really the drum
There's an
roll.
amazing picture in here.
Can you read the message that's in each crate?
No, you go for it.
It's right below the picture.
Okay. Congratulations. You are now 1,461 beers closer to 2029. We can't predict how the nenext 4 years will go, but considering how 2025 started, we have a feeling this many beers will come in handy.
The trade war is on.
You know, there's a picture of the Moosehead Brewery's presidential pack, which contains 1,461 beers in this story.
It's so big.
It's huge, 4 by 4 feet. It's a green crate, exactly what you'd think. It's on a shipping pallet that is moved by one of those pallet movers that maybe you'd find at Sam's Club or Costco. The ones that, you know, you're not allowed to touch, but they have to be professionally operated.
It's like if you were buying a couple of massive
You need- you know what you need?
appliances. That's what that is.
You need a
It's
garage
massive.
to hold this.
Yeah, and a big
Does the beer
freezer.
last that long?
I don't know. I'm a wine
Paul-
drinker. That would be a lot of
Paul
wine.
Brennan in our control room. Does beer last 4 years, like canned? Paul says probably not that long, but
And it probably wouldn't last that long, especially with the headlines. Like it's, making people, some would say. Company has sold 10 presidential packs so far, according to a spokesperson for the company. Whether the family-owned brewery, though, can meet that demand is unclear logistically. I can't even imagine. That's amazing, including shipping. It's $2,400.
well,
That's
this mega pack
massive.
keeps in the nationwide campaign in Canada to buy Canadian products and ditch U.S. alternatives. Canadian companies have seized the moment. They've sometimes offered products at 25% discounts. It's the rate that Trump has threatened to levy most Canadian goods, and clearly labeling U.S. sourced products is for customers who are seeking to avoid buying American.
Listen, we've talked about this, right? With the back and forth and the tariffs that have been imposed from the United States on Canada, which is one of our largest trading partners. And so much of what Canada exports comes to the United States specifically. And so we have seen moves among not U.S. consumers, Canadian consumers, basically to, not buy American alcohol, not buy American-made product, Canadian. So, yeah. They're fighting tough.
You can't get this in the U.S. I'm just looking.
You can't get this.
You can't get it in the U.S. as of now.
What would be the tariff on that?
That's,
If it came,
yeah, 25%, I guess.
honey, delivery.
Like you said, it's only available in 3 provinces right now.
It's just massive. Kind of love it, and just when the headlines are fast and furious, a little levity here.
New Brunswick.
New Brunswick?
You can get it in New Brunswick. That's where they're based. Ontario, you can get it as well.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so kind of interesting. Check this story
in Nova
out.
Scotia, I think.
I've been there. Have you been?
Okay. No, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick,
you're talking
and
about the provinces.
Ontario. That's where you can get it. Yeah.
I have a feeling our TV guys are going to want to talk about this.
Can you imagine smuggling it across the border from Canada to the U.S.?
What do you mean? What package? What package? All right, folks, we've got just about 2.5 minutes to go. We're seeing some buying, certainly in the NASDAQ 100 into the close a little bit. That average up the most on a percentage basis, up about 0.5%. Little changes, though, on the S&P and Dow. Do not go anywhere. We're heading over to our TV colleagues. That's because the closing bell starts right now.
U.S. markets. Our global simulcast starts now.
The Closing Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic here with Alex Steele, taking you through the closing bell. A global simulcast starts now. Scarlett Fu here in the TV studio. Carol Masser and Tim Stenovic, they're in the radio booth as we welcome our audiences from Bloomberg Television, radio, as well as our partnership with YouTube. Carol Massar, not quite the barn burner of a day that we saw yesterday, but according to Glass Half Full Alex Steele, she'll take it up 0.1% on the S&P.
It is a little bit. It feels like, investors trying to be bullish in this environment, but I feel like this is more of the trade we've seen as of late. But, we'll see. Consumer sentiment was a bit of a bummer here, and so sentiment can turn into reality, and I think that continues to freak out investors a bit.
Well, if yesterday was all about conviction, today is all about searching for direction. The S&P 500 moving between gains and losses today many, many times. By my count, about 20 times, Scarlett.
Yeah, well, you can't really count on the U.S. market to rise every day the way you could last year. In the meantime, you look at European stocks up 1%. Jimmy Chang was just on, and he was telling us from Rockefeller Family Global Office that we're still, at least for foreign investors, in the early stages of reallocation to other markets like Europe, like Asia.
I will point out that we're still up for 3 straight days for the S&P. This is the glass half full part. We haven't seen that since February. I appreciate the gain is pretty sad, but I mean, can we actually build on that is really the question if we do close a little bit higher.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too. Basically about half the stocks in the S&P up, half down, but some big names like Tesla moving higher. Mobileye, one of the big gainers on the day as well. We should point out a modest bid coming back into bonds, which is pushing yields lower. The VIX continues to drift lower as well, and the dollar, we'll just call that unchanged on the day. The Bloomberg Dollar Index down about 0.1%. The Dixie down a little bit less than that. We get the closing bells here in New York, and yeah, it looks like it's going to be green across the screen, at least for the 3 major averages here. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is going to finish the day higher. Well, it's only up about 12 points here. We have to wait for it to settle on a percentage basis. Now only up 4 points here. We're just going to call that unchanged on the day. The S&P 500, this is easier to do, up 9 points or about 0.2% on the day. The NASDAQ Composite up 83 points on the day, or about 0.5%. But here's your glass half empty scenario. Dow Transport's down 0.8%. S&P 400 mid-caps down 0.3%. And the Russell 2000 losing 14 points or 0.7%.
All right, I'm going to go back to something, Romaine, that you pointed out, that if you look inside the S&P 500, it's kind of an even split, a little bit more to the downside. You've got 218 names actually gaining ground in the S&P 500. Scarlett, 282 to the downside, 3 unchanged.
Can you name them all?
No. Not now.
Well, let's name 11 of them. How about that? Let's look at the 11 sectors in the S&P 500, and more green than red. Communication services, the best performers, up 1.4%. Some of those broadcasters like Fox leading the advance there. Consumer discretionary also gaining by 1%. And financials in the green as well. Interestingly, utilities are the worst performers, down 1.6%. Over the past year, they and financials are tied for the best performance, up about 21%. Of course, the excitement over the build out of data centers is certainly waning in the early months of 2025.
All right, guys, let's get to some of the individual gainers. CrowdStrike on that list. We saw that an outperformer in both the S&P and the NASDAQ 100. BTIG upgrading the stock to buy from neutral, citing the growth potential of the company, saying with the July IT outage now in the rearview mirror, we think CrowdStrike has much better visibility on forecasts, according to the analyst Gray Powell, who wrote and put out the note. Setting a price target at $431 a share, stock closing at $384 and change, almost $385 to be more specific. So we're looking at a little bit of upside from today. Again, CrowdStrike up about 3.3%. Carvana, an outperformer today, at its highs up almost 6%, finishing the day with about a 3.7% gain. Morgan Stanley raised the company to overweight, saying the pullback in shares creates an attractive entry point. Keep in mind, we had seen the stock down about 25% from a peak in February through the last close amid a broader market slump. They set a price target to $280 from $260, and Carvana closing at $221.66 a share. And then just throwing this one out, Trump Media and Technology finishing up almost 9% in today's session. The company, of course, home to the president's social media site, jumping after signing a non-binding agreement to partner with Crypto.com for a series of ETFs through its Truth.fi brand. Am I saying that right? I don't know. Stock is down more than 30% year to date. 11% of the float shorted.
This is your stock.
Stock is down about 76% from the March 2022 high. All right, I'm passing the baton real quick.
All right, I'll take the baton, and I'll talk about UPS. Shares down today by just over 5%. They fell the most intraday going back to February. Bank of America analyst Ken Hexter now expects the delivery company's first quarter EPS to fall meaningfully short of the consensus estimates. Those earnings come out next month, April 29th, mark your calendars, shares are still down about 45% since those 2022 highs. Once again, UPS down 5% today. Also, taking a look at shares of fertilizer stocks today, they fell as U.S. and Russia restored market exports. CF Industries is the world's largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer. It fell today by 2.3%. It dropped at one point today to the lowest in 8 months. A suspension of hostilities in the Black Sea region, which is a critical trading route for fertilizer, grain, and other farm products, is expected to loosen up supplies from the region and ease volatility. Once again, shares down a little more than 2%. And finally, Lumen Technologies, not to be confused with Lumen from Severance fans. Any Severance fans here?
Yeah. Hey, did you see, Tim? We had a waffle party upstairs.
Did you?
This
I
morning.
saw that today.
Yeah.
I did, yeah.
I don't know if that was like tongue in cheek or if they knew what they were doing.
You know, I'm a little behind, so I'm only up to the melon party at this point.
Oh, once you get to the waffle party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Spoilers.
I have that to look forward to. Shares fell 9.5%, despite the fact that we're watching some M&A news. Bloomberg News reported that AT&T is in talks to acquire Lumen's consumer fiber operations, a transaction valuable over $5.5 billion. This is according to people familiar with the matter. Shares spiked higher after that, but then fell at the end of the day by more than 9%.
All right, we are actually getting earnings now. This actually out of GameStop. Net sales in the most recent quarter down $1.283 billion. That compares to $1.794 billion in the year-ago quarter here. Adjusted EBITDA in the quarter, $96.5 million for the fourth quarter. That compares to about $88 million in the prior quarter. There's not really estimates to compare to because no one really covers this company in that type of depth here. But overall, those are your two headline numbers. You're seeing a modest move in the shares, up about 2%. We'll dive a little bit deeper into the release and see if there's anything meaningful in there about this company's future. But I should point out, as with most of its releases, it is incredibly brief.
Yeah, I was going to say, I kind of skimmed the release. I didn't really find much. Okay, I'm going to the bond market, guys. So buying across the curve, pretty much. You had a 2-year auction that went really well today. There was very strong demand. And then tomorrow, you get the 5-year and then the 7-year on Thursday. So we're going to be watching for that. We're looking at about $70 billion in 5-year notes coming tomorrow. It looks like the takedown's doing pretty well, especially if you have 2-year yields right around 4%. You're clearly going to have some buyers stepping in there, guys.
All right, guys, I don't know how many times your bosses come around and say, hey, what did you do last week? But if you work for the federal government, you certainly get that from Elon Musk, of course, who is running Doge. And apparently the email and the inbox at the government got a bit clogged up.
It's full. So workers who've been submitting their list, which is part of the Doge effort to cut the federal budget and downsize the federal workforce, they're getting bounce back emails that are telling them that their message weren't delivered. Here's what they say. The recipient's mailbox is full and can't accept messages now. Please try resending your message later or contact the recipient directly. What are you supposed to do now?
Sounds a little inefficient to me.
Are you supposed to just get in touch with him on X and tell him this is what you
NASA created an app for workers to use to send their reports instead of messaging the Office of Personnel Management, and they called it a secure internal tool. So
is it called Signal?
Oh,
too soon.
Too soon.
Way too soon.
I had a feeling that was going to come up. Yeah.
Sorry.
They're still trying to clean that whole situation up and answer the questions that have been raised. What about the other story, which is folks in Canada are loading up buying this mega pack of beer, 1,461 cans of Moosehead beer. It's called the Presidential Pack because it's one for each day of Trump's presidency.
I love this. It's like $2,200 or something to buy it. Of course, the first thing I said was like, where do you store all of that? But I thought that, I mean, it's definitely a marketing gimmick, but people may be buying it.
It's all about buying Canada and not buying American products like American beer.
Yeah. And also to survive through the presidency, I feel like I'm reading between the tea leaves on that one.
For Canadians, yes.
For Canadians.
Yeah, interesting.
I've never had Moosehead beer, by the way.
No, it's so good.
No.
You've had it?
I've never had it.
Someday, sure. Who hasn't?
This cannot be shipped to the U.S., by the way. This can only be shipped to 3 different Canadian provinces.
Which makes sense.
Just 3 different which provinces don't get it. Just real quickly, guys, I do want to go back to GameStop for 1 second. The shares now are starting to take off just a little bit. The company, this will be music to your ears, Tim Stenovic, has now updated its investment policy statement to add Bitcoin as an asset. It says it's going to add Bitcoin as a Treasury Reserve asset. Doesn't exactly say by how much or when, but the share is getting a little bit of a pop off of it.
We're doing this again?
Again, apparently.
Okay.
Maybe they'll be like MicroStrategy, turn yourself from a software company to a crypto hedge fund. Or what, well, who knows? Who cares? But look, GameStop, are you buying games anymore? No.
I'm not sure what anyone's buying there.
Okay, but you're buying crypto, right?
I'm not buying crypto.
He's totally buying crypto.
No, collectibles. They're buying collectibles there.
Right?
He's
Something.
buying,
Are you buying anything?
With crypto. There we go.
I'm buying time.
Can you spend? Help this economy out, Tim?
He can't.
More
He's too
likely
liquid.
to buy Moosehead beer.
Moosehead beer.
Oh, Morse.
What did you say? Morse head? like Norse? Like the god? Wow. Okay.
There's a big moose on the crate, Carol.
That is
Carol's
a total
already
wrap.
started drinking it.
I know.
All right.
If it's only Tuesday. Oh, it is only Tuesday. All right, guys, that is a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals, we do it all. I know Alex is heading out, but of course, Romaine and Scarlett finishing up on TV, and Tim and I continuing without Moosehead beer here on Business Week. We'll see you tomorrow.
This is Bloomberg Business Week Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenivek, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
All right, it is Bloomberg Business Week Daily. That's Carol Massar. Carol Moosehead Massar.
I don't know where that came from. It just comes out weird. Maybe I was thinking Morse code, Moosehead beer.
Yeah, okay, well.
Yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Maybe Paul
All I'm drinking,
Brennan
all I'm
will
drinking
bring
is
us
water,
some.
folks.
Hey, the
Only
rebound in
Tuesday.
stocks lost some steam today after one of the market's best days in 2025. This is traders' pause to assess risks stemming from a trade war to an economic slowdown and inflation pressures. Curious what Miguel Sosa has to say about this and also about the place for alternatives within a portfolio in an environment like that. He's head of market research and strategy at the institutional alternative asset manager BlueRock. They've got more than $18 billion in acquired, managed, and disposed assets. Miguel is back with us from San Diego. I do want to start with the public markets because you pay attention to those too, and then we'll talk a little bit about alternatives in portfolios. But when it comes to the public markets, are we kind of out of the woods with this cycle?
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me. Probably not quite yet. So the mood certainly has been bearish the last several weeks. The S&P has lost 10%, really driven, as you mentioned, around tariffs, inflation, the repercussions of tariffs. So the mood is a little bit more cautiously optimistic, as there are expectations that the tariffs will be less pervasive than initially expected. But we're now also, on the other hand, seeing this concept of secondary tariffs to deal with. The inflation print also came out a couple of weeks ago. It was lower. This really didn't calm the markets down. The yield curve on the fixed income side has been calmer. It's been holding relatively steady versus a couple of weeks ago. A few basis points changes here and there, but it already went through its major shift compared to last month. Now, if we look at just the Magnificent Seven, those are still down about 15% from their peak late last year. They've recovered 5 points of that in the last few days. So we're still wading ourselves through the woods.
I am curious, though, Miguel, in terms of the president's moves and initiatives and policies, do you believe that they will make U.S. business stronger, the U.S. economy stronger, ultimately in terms of growth, that financial markets will still be, in the United States, the place to be? Do you buy the plans that he is laying out in terms of tariffs, bringing investment into the United States? Help me out here.
Sure. So ultimately, that is his overall goal, his overall long-term objective. We do believe that he is a pro-economic growth president. And so call it the short-term volatility that we're seeing, and even the comments from the Treasury Secretary of well, we're fine with volatility in financial markets. That's all to give credence to and seriousness to the tariffs and the potential for those tariffs. But we can't help but assume that if they are significantly onerous and they're permanent and they're very high, that would have a detrimental effect to the economy. So ultimately, I think he wants to move manufacturing back to the U.S. This should prompt companies to pay serious attention to that and to invest a little bit more in the U.S. and focus on U.S. production and really drive growth. But at the end of the day, 4 years from now, it's harder to say it's hard to say that he will look at financial markets, and if they're down, he won't take that to heart and really focus on driving value for them.
From someone who is a sophisticated investor and understands market flows and what makes an economy global, dynamic, where investors want to be, does making the U.S. a manufacturer in a bigger way, is that a smart strategy, and does that achieve all of those ends?
That's challenging. It certainly may not be the case in a globalized world. Certainly 10, 20 years ago with globalization, globalization generally helps economies across the world because they can specialize in certain areas and costs can be lower for importing countries. But we are in a new world, and the relationship with China continues to be frayed. It's hard to really assume whether who is in the White House and what party they're affiliated with, that the economic relationship with China will be as close as it was 10, 15, or 20 years ago. So in part, I do agree with you, Carol, in the sense that it's uncharted territories and it could be a challenging environment, but at the same time, I think everyone has the best interest of heart for the U.S. and focused on growing and driving economic growth for the U.S.
Well, I promised we'd talk a little bit about alternatives and the place for alternatives in a portfolio. That's certainly BlueRock's specialty. When you think about the typical portfolio and alternative assets, are you thinking about private credit? Are you thinking about real estate? What are you thinking about?
Sure. So we tend to focus on private credit and on private real estate. But we've selected those asset classes because of the return profile that they offer and the investment characteristics. So, in other words, despite the long-term objective of economic growth, we realize that there's always uncertainty, and we're going through uncertainty and volatility right now as we speak, both in equities markets and in fixed income markets. So at the end of the day, the 60-40 portfolio of 60% equities and 40% fixed income may not work as well, as fabulously well as it did 10 years ago or even longer, decades ago. So these asset classes that we focus on, we believe will offer a stabilizing leg of a stool for investors' portfolios. Specific to private real estate has been a very effective hedge to inflation historically. So if the economy does face, call it moderate inflation of around 4%, private real estate can help navigate that environment better than equities. On the private credit side, the alternative credit side, there is significant alpha opportunities within alternative private credit if you have that expertise, that active management expertise, to find the investment opportunities, those loans that have the opportunity to pay to maturity and offer investors a 10 to a 12% yield.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, and I think it's a story today on the Bloomberg Terminal, it really has to do with Germany, but Germany's financial watchdog is pushing insurers to really step up scrutiny of private credit investments, and that was after a few firms were stung by losses on loans to real estate companies. Just 30 seconds here. How do you make sure that your investments, certainly in the private world, what's your clearinghouse or process to make sure you don't get caught in a bad situation? And again, forgive me, it's only about 30, 40 seconds here.
Sure, it's a very valid point. True private credit is illiquid. You have to hold it to maturity. And so you assume it's worth 100 until it's drastically not worth 100 and the company or the loan defaults. In our view, we focus on a little bit more the liquid side of private credit, where through active management, you can trade out if you think the company is facing financial troubles and focus that capital elsewhere.
All right, so look forward to already the next time we get some have you back here. Miguel, thank you. Miguel Sosa, Head of Market Research and Strategy at the Institutional Alternative Asset Manager, BlueRock, joining us from San Diego, California.
Up next, the former Google executive who wants you to go after what you want and get it. That's next on Business Week.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg, and this Bloomberg Business Flash is brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment. Offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. Just getting the latest quarterly numbers out of GameStop. It reported net sales for the fourth quarter of $1.28 billion. GameStop shares, they are up after hours by roughly 6.5%. GameStop's board did approve an update to its investment policy to add Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. After hours, we got GameStop up now by 6.7%. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all higher today, with the S&P making it 3 winning days in a row. S&P up 9, a gain of 0.2%. The Dow eked out a gain, little changed, up less than 0.1%, up 4 points. NASDAQ today up 83, a gain for NASDAQ of 0.5%. 10-year at 4.31%, with the 2-year yielding 4.01%. Spot gold up $9 the ounce to $3,020, up 0.3%. While West Texas Intermediate crude just about flat on the day, $69.13 a barrel, and Bitcoin up 0.5%, 88,326 on Bitcoin. So again, recapping 3 in a row for the S&P, up today by 0.2%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pallett. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hey, thanks so much for that update, Charlie. Do appreciate it. That's Carol Master. I'm Tim Stanovic. It is Bloomberg Business Week Daily. Some news in the world of Google today. The information out with the report that Google has told some researchers to take out language that has to do with DEI. Now, the information cited someone with direct knowledge of the instructions. Instead, Carol, they're told to use terms like build for all and universal design rather than terms like product equity and inclusion. It's similar to what we're seeing from so many companies in recent months.
I would safe to say that I think HR departments and workforces and companies, they're trying to figure it out in this new environment. Our next guest spent 18 years at Google working in a wide variety of roles, including starting the popular Own Your Career program at the company. Purpose of that program is to help people at Google do their own jobs better and even get their next job at the company. She took that work, she turned it into a book. It's called Wild Courage. It's go after what you want and get it. And she joins us here in our Interactive Brokers studio. It is good to have you here with us. We want to start broadly because the work environment is going through some changes. And I think, obviously the political environment and, that is certainly finding its way into the workforce. How does a company kind of find their way through? How do they stay true to their employee base? Yeah. How do they stay to the programs that they maybe put in place over the last 5 to 10 years and believe it's important to the company, and yet face a government, a federal government and administration that is looking at these things very closely?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt there's tremendous change in the workplace and how this is evolving with DEI programs. And what's so important about this work, in this book, Wild Courage, Go After What You Want and Get It, is that this puts the agency back on you. So no matter what's happening that might be outside of your control, this puts the agency on you. So right now, think of something you want. It could be a goal, a promotion, a raise, a relationship even, and think about what's standing between you and achieving that thing. Well, by the time I started working on Wild Courage, I'd trained tens of thousands of people, directly, indirectly, on success, leadership, influence, and the same theme kept coming up: their relationship to fear. Fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, fear of judgment of others. And Wild Courage is the process of feeling that fear and taking action anyway. And it's the set of tools that help you go after what you want and get it. And it's so important right now because we feel like we're lacking so much control. There's so much that we can't change, but this you can. You can always change yourself and push past that fear.
But Jenny, what if you say, listen, I'm working at this company. I love this company. I've been here for several years, love it. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey folks, these DEI initiatives, we're not going to do anymore. We're going to move away from these things. Like you talk about having no fear. Like, do you go to your management? Does the employee base, do we anticipate that they kind of step up and take notice and say, wait a minute, folks, this isn't the culture we've had. I don't want to work here anymore. Or do you anticipate that we might see employee bases kind of fighting back?
Yeah, well, I think we will see a shift for sure, and I think it'll
be a shift in what?
I think we'll see a shift in how people feel and how people feel a sense of what this company provides or what is part of the culture or part of what they expect of any kind of DEI programs or any sort of expected resources or
a shift away.
A shift. Well, I think that if we're already starting to see the shifts, right?
Yeah.
You just mentioned some of them already with
Fair.
people changing language, and so I think people will rise to the occasion again, start taking agency, and start finding their own ways to learn and grow. Because a lot of these DEI programs are helping with communication, they're helping with confidence, they're helping level the playing field. And that's what I try to do in Wild Courage. So it's almost a perfect time to be bringing this work to the world, which is very different than the work I did at Google, but so much more exciting and energizing because it covers these 9 sizzly traits.
Well, let's talk about some of those traits because there are some traits in here that I think people would be surprised to hear in this type of book. For example, manipulative. You argue that people have to be manipulative. They have to learn how to be manipulative to have this wild courage. What do you mean?
Yeah, so I'm reclaiming language here. These are 9 traits that raise eyebrows, right? Weird, selfish, shameless, nosy, obsessed, brutal, manipulative, reckless, bossy. But we live in fear that people might call us one of these traits, and so it prevents us from taking action, from being bold and going after what we want. And so when we reclaim them, we could think of manipulative, not in the traditional sense, but more in a sense of the courage to have influence and build lasting relationships. Because whether you're selling a product, a program, or frankly yourself, your ability to win friends and allies and partners is all about mutual benefit. And that's where I want people to lean in.
Well, it's not just the workplace. You talk about it from a personal perspective, too. Your husband, John.
Yeah.
How you met him.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So it's 2011. I'm riding the subway home from work, the C train, and about 20 feet away from me stands this really gorgeous guy. Beautiful blue eyes, thick brown wavy hair, and I want to talk to him, but something holds me back. Fear of failure. What if he's a convicted felon? Fear of uncertainty. What if he's married? Fear of judgment, right? What if 100 people stare at me on this packed train? The same 3 fears that I hope Wild Courage helps people push through. So I'm a confident Google employee on the outside, but I'm scared and timid on the inside. So I do nothing as the train passes stop after stop after stop, and frankly, as life passes me by. But I make a deal with the universe. I say, if he gets off at my stop, then maybe I'll try to strike up a conversation with him. And if not, then say la vie. He gets off at the next stop, 59th Street. That is not my stop. And then all of a sudden, I feel this wave of wild courage wash over me and practically push me off the subway. And I catch up with him. I tap him on the shoulder. I say, excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you. You're wearing gloves, so I can't tell if you're wearing a wedding ring, but in the event that you're not married, you were on my subway and I thought you were cute. Any chance I could give you my business card? He calls the next day. We go out a week later. 3 years later, we're getting married, and we've now been married happily for 11 years with 2 great little hooligans, ages 7 and 9, Ari and Noah.
I'm just going to say that for those of us who live and love in New York, it's very easy that story could have been where he called the conductor or the police. That's true. Who is this woman?
Or he could have turned around very quickly with an arm, and you could have ended up.
Just saying. I'm not saying wild courage works every time. I mean, we talked.
I'm listening to this, and I'm just saying, well, wait a minute. No offense.
Yeah.
But I still think that there's differences for men and women with some of these traits.
Yeah.
So help me out here.
Yeah, well, I just had this beautiful homecoming back to Google. I just gave a keynote at Google. And someone did ask, well, how does this, relate to women versus men? And these labels can get very gendered, especially some of them. Shameless or manipulative or bossy, right? Or nosy. These are some that sometimes are labeled more toward women versus men. But the underlying principles of wild courage are applicable for anybody, whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur, male, female, born in Sao Paulo or Tokyo or New York, because the root of it all is the courage to push past that fear to chase what you want.
What?
Which ones do you think are gendered? I'm asking Carol because...
Manipulative.
Bossy?
Bossy.
I feel like women often get called bossy and men often don't get called bossy.
Yeah, I've never heard a man called bossy. I've heard a man called direct and a strong leader and confident and
Obsessed
competent.
is another one.
Oh yeah.
Where I hate to say this, but I think for a woman it's let it go already. Whereas with he's going after what he wants.
Yeah, he's determined.
That's a good point.
He's going after opportunities. He's strategic, right? A woman is manipulative. A man is strategic. A woman is bossy. A man is determined.
So do you think men and women have to approach this differently?
Well, I think that it's interesting you asked that. In each trait, each chapter, I share what are called trait traps.
Right.
When you take a trait too far and you're classically manipulative or classically selfish. Again, selfish is the courage to stand up for what you want. Shameless is the courage to stand behind your efforts and abilities. Well, because this can be harder for women to toe that line because of things like the double bind, right? We're supposed to be sweet and nice, but we also in a workplace want to be direct and confident and competent. So I think that women are probably going to be perceived as falling into these trait traps more often than men, just because the expectations of women can be different. But it really does run the gamut. It depends on the person, depends on their personality, depends on the environment.
I love this too, because you do provide a lot of context around each of these words or these approaches. But you say power grows through proximity, get adjacent to it, rub shoulders with the elite, listen, pay attention, be seen. For people to know you, they first have to recognize you. So be visible, be present.
That's why I sit next to you.
Yeah, exactly.
I gotta sit next to you. I mean, everybody stops at you. But what's the balance between being noticed and being annoying? Because someone who is a squeaky wheel constantly, I think it's safe to say that people sometimes they start to ignore you. However,
sometimes they
listen because they're like, enough already. Let's just do what this person wants.
So here's where I like to challenge people. You might know some people in your life who are that obnoxious, over the top, too much squeaky wheel.
We're in media. That never happens.
Right. But, and actually maybe
most of us are normal.
Well, right. Okay. So you just sort of shared it right there. Go ahead.
Well, all I'm saying, if you're saying you're the normal one, Carol, if you're saying we're normal, we're not normal. We're not normal.
We're not normal. That's probably a bad word. Anyway, finish. Go ahead.
Outside of media, think of 20 people, friends from college, former colleagues. My hunch is that the majority of them you think need to dial it up and kick their imposter syndrome to the curb or be more confident or ask for what they want. It's like the advice you'd give to a friend, like, no, your company laid off 3 people and now you're doing the job of them and they've given you no more money and no raise and no promotion and no different title. You'd say, well, go ask your boss for what you need, a new title and a 20% raise. But we fail to do that ourselves. So it's almost like wild courage is the advice you give to your friend, but that you struggle to give to yourself.
So what if you have the courage, you ask, and they're like, nope.
Yeah, this happened to me.
Real quickly, we've got 30 seconds.
Yeah, okay. So I was doing a lot of asking about this book, people helping me promote it, and some people ghosted me, some people just gave me a blatant no, and some people in a really harsh way, and you just have to push through it. It's spine straightening, it's part of being reckless and taking risks and erring on the side of action, and that makes you better over time.
Good stuff, interesting. By the way, I think you're normal.
I don't know.
Well, chapter one is weird, so we're not, I don't know if normal is a good thing or not.
I'm not normal.
Jenny, thank you so much. This was fun. Good luck with the book. Jenny Wood, her new book is out today. It's called Wild Courage, Go After What You Want and Get It. Coming up next, where are we going, Mr. Normal?
We're going to an exclusive look at a new film. That's next on Bloomberg Businessweek Daily.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. GameStop shares higher after hours. GameStop now up by 6.2%. The video game retailer says its board has approved an update to its investment policy to add Bitcoin as a Treasury reserve asset. The company also reported fourth quarter net sales that tumbled 28% year over year, but after hours, GameStop shares up now by just about 6.1%. S&P today higher by 3 winning sessions in a row. The S&P now at 5776, up 0.2%. The Dow eked out a gain up 4 points today, little changed on the day, but higher. NASDAQ up 83, a gain of 0.5%. 10-year 4.31%, the 2-year 4.01%. Gold up $9 the ounce to $3,020 for the precious metal. That is a gain today of 0.3%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.1%, 69.19 a barrel on WTI. Bitcoin 88,100 now. Bitcoin up 0.3%. Bottom line here, an update. Julie Beal, chief market strategist at Kane Anderson and Rudnick, was a guest on Bloomberg Businessweek Daily, and she offered up this advice for investors.
This is a really good time to be sitting on your hands, frankly. I like the Howard Marks statement, don't just do something, sit there. And I think this is a real sit there moment where as long as you have a portfolio that's put together of good quality companies that are they themselves able to respond to changes in the market, you should be okay. That is better off than trying to position for a very specific outcome.
Julie Beal of Kane Anderson Rudnick. Engine Capital has taken a stake in Lyft and is pushing for a strategic review of the ride-hailing app. This according to a letter reviewed by Bloomberg News. Lyft shares today up 2.1%. Crosstown rival Uber down 1.2%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hey, thanks so much for that update, Charlie. Do appreciate it. You may remember the harrowing Business Week cover story last year about sextortion. It's the digital crime wave targeting teenage boys that's having deadly consequences. The investigation revealed the ways digitally savvy Nigerian scammers use social media to target thousands of victims in the U.S., earning them millions of dollars and leading to at least 20 suicides over an 18-month period. That story by our own Bloomberg News investigative reporter, Olivia Carville. Now there's a new film, directed by Matthew O'Neill and Perry Peltz, and based on Olivia's reporting. It's called Can't Look Away, and it follows a team of lawyers battling tech giants, fighting for families whose children suffered devastating harm linked to social media.
These companies have been gaslighting us for years. This is all about money.
The purpose of all commercial ventures is to create a demand.
Our children are the casualties. We need to take back the power from these companies. They created a dangerous situation and then manipulated these kids.
They know the levels of addiction, sexual abuse. They know the levels of suicide. They're not showing our kids what they want to see. They're showing you what they can't look away from.
Well, there you have it. That's just a little excerpt from this new film. It's called Can't Look Away. Olivia Carville joins us now in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. You know, this morning when we got the preview link, Carol and Paul both asked me if I'd seen it yet, and they were blown away by just the 3-minute trailer. Really, really powerful stuff. What's your involvement?
Well, thank you so much for having me on to talk about the story. In terms of the documentary, it's largely based on my reporting, so a lot of the stories and families who feature in the film have also featured in Business Week articles and stories that I've written here at Bloomberg. I also was grateful to have a consulting producer role, so I was really able to see behind the scenes how the whole thing was stitched together. I've never been able to do that as a largely print-focused reporter before, so was able to see the power of a whole new medium.
Tell us, for those who might not know the story, about what had happened and what had happened to various teenagers and really children.
So the issue that you were raising before, Tim, sextortion, that is only one harm that comes up in the film. Obviously, the ways in which children are being harmed by social media in the digital world, there we're seeing more and more, like we're seeing and this comes up in the film too, kids who are purchasing counterfeit pills through Snapchat and then dying from overdoses, children who are being fed non-stop streams of suicidal content leading to them taking their own lives. That issue also comes up in the film. So it really highlights the varying ways in which kids can be harmed through social media addiction. And this is, the way in which the algorithms are now designed to keep you glued for as long as possible.
What's the solution here? Because I watched this trailer and I was horrified, and my first reaction is like, how do I keep this away from my kids? And then I think to myself, well, you have to be a better dad about this stuff, because I'm addicted to these apps too.
And kids watch what you're doing,
Exactly.
and then they reflect their parents. Yeah, I think people are aware that social media in some capacity is bad or has negative consequences on children. What I don't think a lot of people are aware of is the devastating harms that some kids are going through. Like, this is tragic cases of death, suicide, and, meeting these families, you see what, just how bad the impacts really can be. And that's what this film is about. In terms of what can be done, I think education is the most important thing. I think sitting down and talking to youth, helping them understand what the risks are and understand that maybe that person you're communicating with on social media isn't who you think they are. Maybe you need to set some guardrails up around your own social media use, and educating kids through digital literacy in schools. We are so far behind the ball here. Not only is these technology platforms kind of outpace the law, but teachers, parents, youth, police, no one knows how to prevent these deaths right now. We are trying to catch up, and unfortunately, the consequences are falling on children, and that's where we're seeing some of these cases where kids have died.
What about the companies and their responsibility? And are you seeing, and you've done so much reporting on really the egregious actions that we've seen out of social media, especially with the younger population. So, how many years have we been talking about more oversight needed on social media of some of these big tech companies? Is there any momentum, any progress that's being made in terms of the pushback against these companies, that you feel like things are growing where these companies are starting to be made accountable?
Well, at its heart, the film is really about corporate greed. It's about these companies putting profit over safety. And while we have seen in recent years more safety features start to come up on these platforms, like after that sextortion piece ran in Business Week last year, Meta removed more than 70,000 accounts linked to financial sextortionists in Nigeria. And it came out as kind of a positive impact of the story. And sure, it was positive, but hold on. Why weren't they removed before? Like, why did it take a Business Week article to result in that kind of impact? And I think that's the frustration that parents, are now reaching boiling point. It's like, hold on, why are all these kids being harmed before you take action?
Olivia, what did they say? Forgive me, and I don't remember. Like, what did they say? Why weren't they taken down beforehand? Was it just that they weren't being policed, or what was it?
They just weren't looking closely enough. They weren't tracking the specific accounts that were linked to this crime. So they were removing accounts if they were informed of them, but they were not proactively looking for them. So the companies do roll out various safety features and guardrails, but in many cases, when you actually dig into them, they can actually be kind of diluted from what the press releases claim. And I'm hoping that we're going to see some real impact in the coming years. Maybe that's legislatively or through the companies actually doing something different.
So it raises the question, what do these parents want? Just in the last 30 seconds that we have with you, what are they trying to achieve in the film?
They want corporate accountability. They want the internet to become a safer place, and they want to get the word out.
Are you optimistic that can happen?
It has to. What's the alternative?
I don't even, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like it's our future, it's our kids, right? Who we're supposed to be protecting.
But we don't talk about internet safety in earnings reports. We talk about the growth of the apps, time spent on these apps. We talk about how many people are spending how much time on the apps. We don't talk about how safe the apps are being.
How much money do they make off of the advertising by people clicking, right? Like
That's
the volume, the velocity.
That's because these are for-profit corporations, and their main goal is to keep you glued to the screen so they can make more money through advertisers. And they have been very effective at kind of changing the message. These are advertising businesses at the end of the day.
Olivia Carville, thank you so much. The premiere, the film out on Jolt on April 4th. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week Daily. I'm Carol Massar, along with Tim Stenivek, live in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio on a day where markets were bouncing around a little bit, but we definitely finished off our highs and lows of the session for the most part. The NASDAQ 100 just off its highs.
You see the Dow today?
Yeah.
Did nothing.
I know.
That's okay. The S&P 500 up about 0.2%. It did move between gains and losses like more than a dozen times.
The S&P 500 did
something.
Something. Barely.
Something. It did something.
Barely.
Thank you, Nora.
A smidge.
A smidge.
Let's take a look at some stocks on the move today. Bloomberg News equities reporter Nora Melinda with Tuesday's stock movers. Let's start with a name that definitely saw some selling today.
Yes, I'm looking at KB Home. So I cover real estate stocks, and this one has been on my eye today. We saw KB Home shares fall 5.2%. Now, this is a home builder, and they target first-time home buyers as well as first-time move-up buyers. So those are people that are wanting to move out of their home into a new one, but it's their first time doing so. Now, this company reported sales that missed expectations. They fell short of their goals, and Wall Street punished them as well as a lot of their peers after that news. It also slashed its revenue guidance. They're saying that home builders are continuing to feel the pinch when it comes to the affordability concerns. And so we have investors that are really worried that mortgage rates are still remaining way too high to spur demand.
I'm a little annoyed because I missed this one today. And I should have done this as a decliner.
Yeah, this would have been a good one.
This would have been a really good one.
It's such a great read on the economy, right?
Yeah.
Those first
Most
time
definitely.
who have been having a tough time because mortgage rates are high.
Right.
But it's just showing it continues, and we know how important the housing market is to the overall U.S. economy. You know, you buy a house, you fill it with stuff, right?
Exactly. I'm also keeping an eye on Trump Media and Technology. That's ticker DJT.
Did not go down, actually rallied
It went
today.
up. We have green here on the screen. Shares were up more than almost 9%. Now, this is after news that the company is partnering with a Singapore-based company, Crypto.com, to offer quote-unquote made in America investments that will also include ETFs. One interesting thing to note about Crypto.com is that they've actually been dealing previously with a legal battle with U.S. regulators last year, but they dropped their complaint after President Trump's November victory. So this is just an interesting story here, but we did see Trump Media shares getting a pop off of this news.
What does
I didn't
this
know they
mean?
were based in. I didn't know they were based in Singapore.
Right? It's very interesting.
Don't forget about the Crypto.com arena in Los Angeles.
This is true. Have you been?
I have not been to the Crypto.com. Was it the Staples Center before?
Sounds about right.
I've been to the Staples Center, but yeah, never the Crypto.com arena.
Not the rebranded one.
So wait,
not the rebranded one.
So this means the president's going to be offering up ETFs?
I don't know about the president's personal involvement.
Right.
But it's his company.
It is his company.
Correct.
But
And he
Devin
owns a
Nunes,
bunch of shares in there.
Devin Nunes runs the company. Yes, he owns a bunch of shares. I saw people pointing out that typically presidents put their assets in blind trusts.
Okay.
But that hasn't been the case with President Trump.
The more you know.
That was one of my gainers, too. It caught my attention as well.
Okay.
Always interesting.
You're already hip.
All right. So 2 names that are fairly well known to the Bloomberg audiences, but you have a name that I don't know that we talk about all the time, but man, did it move in a big way today.
I know. I'm looking at Cassava Sciences. That's ticker SAVA. Now, this is a small biotech company, about $9.8 billion in market cap. We saw shares of the company that plunged more than 30% at the close. That was the lowest level since 2019. And this is coming after the drug developer said that it's going to discontinue its Alzheimer program by the end of the second quarter. And this followed a late stage trial failure. And of course, investors are really, when it comes to biotech, they're looking to see that they're able to cross these hurdles and get over them. But of course, this isn't great news for Cassava, especially as we think about them discontinuing this Alzheimer program. A name I wasn't familiar with either.
No, 28% of the float is shorted. So investors have been pretty negative on this one. But you know, these biotech, I mean, it's such a small, it's a micro cap, right? I mean, $92 million.
I'd say so.
Maybe it was a little bit more before today's drop. It's $1.90 a share.
Just seeing who owns it.
Who owns it?
Just the passive indexes. So BlackRock and Vanguard are the biggest shareholders in it. Just seeing if there are any.
Lost 90% last year.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's interesting. Like these are ones that, you know, I mean, talk about a big mover in today's session.
Small company.
In a big way. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
All right. That's a look at some of the movers.
Yeah.
We're going to leave it on that note. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Bloomberg News equities reporter Nora Melinda with today's Tuesday's stock movers. That's going to do it for this edition. We're getting ready to wrap up here. It'll be interesting to see what we get out of the White House. I feel like so much of today's conversations, trade talk, was kind of coming out of the White House. I almost felt like investors were taking a break to see kind of where it all goes.
Well, looking at the most read in the last hour, a lot coming from Washington, D.C. President Trump is reviewing the use of the Signal app. He did defend Mike Waltz after that chat leak. But there's another story here that gets my attention. It's about J.D. Vance going to Greenland. We knew that his wife, Usha Vance, was actually going to Greenland. But he said, Vice President J.D. Vance, that he would join a delegation visiting Greenland this week, even as the trip has sparked criticism from local leaders in the Danish territory that Trump has suggested that should come under American control.
Yeah, I mean, the president's been pushing for the United States to basically take on annex the territory, causing it as critical to U.S. national security concerns. So we've done some great conversations. We've done some great reporting here at Bloomberg about why Greenland is so interesting. And so I highly recommend you check it out on the Bloomberg. In terms of other stories,
what do you have your eye on?
I don't know. It's kind of been a weird little day.
The GameStop shares are higher.
They are.
After the company said its board had approved an update to its investment policy to add Bitcoin as a Treasury reserve asset.
What's the stock doing in the aftermarket?
It was up as much as 8% earlier.
Yeah. Pulling it
What's
up
it doing
here.
now?
Up about 5%. All right, that's going to do it for us. Wrapping up Tuesday. I'm Carol Master along with Tim Stenovic. Balance of Power starts right now.
From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Kaylee Lyons, I'm Joe Matthew.
The U.S. says Russia and Ukraine agree to a ceasefire in the Black Sea, even as the Kremlin says a deal depends on preconditions, including sanctions relief. We'll discuss with former Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman.
President Trump standing by his national security advisor after a journalist was inadvertently sent war plans via the Signal text app. While the president's top two intelligence officials testified today on Capitol Hill. We'll talk this out with Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy of Illinois, who serves on the House Intelligence Committee.
And Republican congressional leaders meet with President Trump's economic team on reconciliation, while rank and file members meet with Bridgewater's Ray Dalio about debt and deficits. Garrett Watson from the Tax Foundation will have insights straight ahead.
Thanks for being with us. On the Tuesday edition of Balance of Power, I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lyons. Before attending a key tax meeting at the White House today with top Republican lawmakers, House Speaker Mike Johnson said this about working with his colleagues in the Senate.
There's no daylight between House and Senate Republicans. We are one team. I speak with Leader Thune about this constantly and with individual members of the Senate over there. We're all united on the mission, and there's been different ideas about how to complete the mission, but I think it's all coming together now. This week will be pivotal.
Joining us now with more is Bloomberg's Megan Scully. So, Megan, if this week will be pivotal, what exactly has to pivot this week in terms of getting the Senate and the House on the same page?
I don't know that we're going to get them on the same page this week. Contrary to what the Speaker said, there is daylight between the two chambers, particularly on the details. And as we know, covering these things on Capitol Hill, the details is where we have problems generally in these negotiations. So, things